I have no idea where this will lead us, but I have a definite feeling it will be a place both wonderful and strange.
Hello, and welcome to the wonderful and strange Twin Peaks Logcast. I am Kalil, and with me today is the electricity to my Smash TV set.
Don't hurt me. Thank you very much. I like. There's so many good TVs inside this one.
I'm
there
the
are
Smash
whole
TV
TVs
set.
to your Smash TV set. But why would you let you do that to yourself by me being the proxy? Why would you allow me to do that then?
I don't know. Why do I allow you to hurt me through this podcast, Professor?
I don't know. You answered the... This is now the wonderful and strange Twin Peaks therapy session brought to you by me, the Unplugged Professor. Sponsored by Lawrence Jacoby. Now...
Oh, no. Questionable credentials from this offset.
Oh, yes. Always a good way to start out the podcast with questionable credentials. But hey, we made it this far.
Professor, what are we talking about today? I'm going to let you explain to the audience.
We are talking about Twin Peaks.
Uh-huh.
Fire Walk With Me.
Yes, we are. Didn't we already talk about that, though?
We did multiple times, multiple takes. But now we're doing it again. But this time we've separated it into two larger holes, if you will. One of them is the Deerwood Meadows arc, followed by the Laura Palmer arc.
If you have any questions regarding what the professor means by two larger holes, you can email us at snakeeyedreams@gmail.com or tweet at us at snakeeyedreams1. That's the numeral 1, as in go watch part 1 if you haven't done that first.
Yes, so...
And by watch, I mean listen.
Or do whatever you want. I, as the Unplugged Professor, believe that you should do as you wish. So please, by all means, listen to this part without any context.
Speaking of not having necessary context, we're going to be talking first about The Diary of Laura Palmer, which we'd also previously talked about, but now that we have the movie under our proverbial sleeve,
yes,
the whole disc under our sleeve,
yep,
we can kind of do a little bit of comparison.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not opposed to the idea we might give some spoilers here for the Laura Palmer book, which you should read.
Yep.
Unless you want free will like the professor, in which case, don't.
Do as you wish. But elsewise, okay, so first difference, Kalil.
Mm-hmm.
The book has pages.
The book has pages. This
And
has
then
more pictures.
This has more pictures, yes. It has moving pictures, one would say.
I think it's really good that the movie didn't have, like, Laura Palmer narrating.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine if, like, Laura Palmer was, like, narrating throughout this film?
I would love to hear Laura Palmer narrating over the death of Teresa Banks, something that she would have no idea about and have no reason to even come into consciousness with it. So, I think that would have been an absolutely fantastic adaptation, clearly. No, it's good that we actually have the pure experiences throughout. I think that having us only led by our own eyes rather than the experiences of a biased narrator, it makes this a more personal work, but personal for, like, say, for example, myself or yourself.
Yeah. I think it's really hard to find that balance when you're making a movie like this because it's not necessarily through Laura Palmer's eyes that we see the story. We are kind of a fly on the wall for all of this, and I think if it was handled badly, there could be a bit of a voyeuristic almost element to this, that we're witnessing this person's suffering. I know that's one criticism of the movie, is that there's just a lot of suffering in it. But I do feel like it was handled tactfully, both in the writing and the directing, that even though, it's not technically a point of view narrative, we don't have like a first person camera from Laura Palmer's view as we make out with James. That'd be a VR experience I don't want to have currently.
No.
VR cocaine. I don't want that. So
I will take VR cocaine over VR James.
Anyway, so I kind of thought that even though it's not technically point of view, it consistently feels like once Laura Palmer's on the screen, it is her story and it's being told as bluntly and truthfully as possible. It doesn't feel like it's going to hide anything from us. It's showing us very much the final days of Laura Palmer if we take the Japanese title in mind.
Yes, but again, with potentially less bias, as we have had with the Laura Palmer diary, in which it seems that is going to be completely in her control. In fact, we don't even know how much we can even call consistent if she's already got one fake diary off to the side.
Well,
if
and
there's
Bob
any
intervening
paranoia
too.
with Bear. Yeah, Bob, not Bear.
Yeah, with Bob interfering in the diary, there is a little bit of that unreliable narrative. Like, I remember we were kind of speculating at one point over whether certain events even happened because Laura calls into question the fact that she's not even sure what's real anymore.
Yep.
So, like, the situation with the little girl and the cat, it's anybody's guess if that was fully real or not, because Laura's not 100% sure herself.
Meanwhile, we know 100% events such as the Red Room happen exactly.
Yeah.
Everything is as it says, 100% to be interpreted.
There's
as we
no
see it.
subjectivity regarding the reality of this film.
Exactly. Or any reality, really.
One thing I remember you commenting on in this eighth rewatch of the movie is Bobby
That's
Briggs.
not hyperbole, guys.
It's not hyperbole. An eighth rewatch in like 2 months. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure many fans have beaten this record, and we're very proud of you, but for us, it was quite a lot. But yeah, you mentioned Bobby. Kind of liking Bobby in relation to the movie, having read the book first.
Yes.
Do you want to expand upon that?
If you don't mind me expanding upon that,
I've asked for it. Thank you. Tell me about the Bubby.
The Bubby. No, within the context of something such as the book going into the movie, and even just vice versa, Bobby is a character that seems to have just been swept into Laura Palmer's story. Once someone who, by the book's context, was someone who was quite innocent, kind of becoming impure in the overall needs and wants of Laura Palmer. In fact, there is a scene specifically later on in the film that involves like the need for cocaine that Laura has that Bobby almost recognizes. It's at the end of the book, Laura kind of almost like accepts Bobby's affair with Shelley Johnson, and both of them accepting each other's vices and what they need and want at the end of the day. It's very poetic, really, especially retroactively thinking onto it. And since Laura Palmer's diary is abandoned early inside the film, you could still say that those events sort of lock up. Now, mind you, there's also some mild fun inconsistencies that happen to the end, but we can call this a maybe lightly altered Elseworld in that respect.
What are the discrepancies you're kind of noticing?
I'm referring to how the book sort of ends almost as if she is going to be chasing Bob and meeting up with Bob. Meanwhile, at the beginning of the movie, we see that Bob has been tearing out pages, something she discovered earlier inside the book and just like made notes that someone's taking pages, and reporting that straight to Harold before, again, abandoning the journal.
So the timeline doesn't quite add up that way.
It doesn't quite add up, but there's still enough inside the majority that, at the very least, in an emotional end to it, you could say that a lot can work with the book and the movie.
They're complementary without necessarily being fully in line.
Yes.
I almost get the sense of David Lynch probably read the book. I think he read his daughter's book, but I don't know if he took consistent notes to make sure his movie one-to-one matched.
I hope that he read the book, especially since he made the comment of something like getting Laura Palmer emotionally, unless he just like through like some sort of, mitosis? He just absorbed the media of the book and said, yes. He consumed it. He just like put it onto a plate, ate it, and it's like, honey, you get Laura Palmer.
And going back to inconsistencies with Bobby, there's a bit of a discrepancy here potentially with whether Bobby killed someone in a drug run earlier in the narrative in the book, or if it's supposed to be that the book's been retconned and now he killed the other drug man later, or if Bobby's killed two people between the book and the movie. But there's a bit of a confusing point about Bobby killing someone in the book, Bobby killing someone in the movie, but they're acting like both times of the first time he's killed someone, but they're not the same situation.
Honestly, it's a fun thoughts experiment to play on, just being like, okay, between 1 to 2 people Bobby has killed. He has a range of a single to 2 people.
It's like even between fairly similar, mostly agreeing versions of Laura Palmer's story, there's just these little loose threads you can tug at. You know, the thread will be torn, Professor. The thread will be torn.
I mean, in this instance, like he was defending himself and trying to shoot someone down. And in the other one, it's just like something that was more so inside of this little car chase scene. So maybe we could just say that the man ran into the bullet the first time, but this time definitively Bobby shot 3 times and killed a man.
I feel like both times afterward he reacted like it was the first time. But
you never forget your first until you just try again. He was also under a bunch of drugs, so
I think the diary also helps kind of fill in the blanks with some of the characters we didn't get to see in the movie. Like, we didn't see Johnny Horn. We didn't see Ben Horn. But I think because of the book, we can kind of fill in what those scenes might have looked like if they had been filmed. So I thought that was kind of nice. The only one I feel a little bit unsure about is actually Harold. I think the aspect of Laura sort of preying on Harold is kept through the scene where just for a split moment, her face turns white, her lips are black. She takes on this sort of menacing appearance like Wyndham Earle or later Leland does in the same movie. But correct me if I'm wrong, later Harold and Laura like make out and it just feels a little bit strange. Like, don't get me wrong, it could be a situation where Harold, even though he's being preyed upon, also loves Laura, and he's kind of having a mix of emotions, and he does want to kiss. But in the diary, it kind of makes it sound like Harold's so afraid of her that anytime she makes advances, he like shirks away.
A tale as old as time, a song as old as rhyme. Laura and Harold.
I kind of feel like the book portrays Harold as more timid and afraid of Laura's advances, whereas the movie, he's making out with her. So I don't know if those mesh or not. I wouldn't call it like a contradiction. They're just different tones.
I mean, you could also argue that there's a little bit of, say, for example, them trying to be close to one another in the sense of like a necessary comfort. Say, for example, just like how Bobby may accept, you know what, this is what Laura needs. That's fine. Bobby's got you. In this case, Harold's got you, but just for a short time, as we're inside of a crazy cocktail of emotions at the moment.
And I guess I don't want to put you under the pressure to ask you like which version is better for Laura's story, because I don't even know if I have the answer for that.
Yeah.
I feel like they're doing different things enough that a direct comparison isn't quite fair to what they are. Don't get me wrong, it'd be a fun discussion to have, but I feel like the Laura Palmer diary tells a more complete story of Laura because it's longer form and it's going through more of her life, whereas this is really just the last few days, and it emphasizes more of the supernatural elements that in a book, you can't quite capture the visceral feeling, whereas this can show it. It can immerse you in it. So I think both are important to understanding Laura. Both are important to understanding Bob and Leland. But I think they're doing different enough things that just because you've seen the movie doesn't mean you shouldn't read the book, or vice versa.
It's thanks to the movie that I don't really consider Twin Peaks as a singular timeline. I mean, the show already, I had a hard time with that, with just general pacing, like, what day is it now?
Yeah.
But I find it to be a more amorphous blob with the addition of a few characters that make a little bit of a sneaky appearance.
And you like that, I'm going to assume.
Yep.
Good.
Yep, I do. I really do. I like whenever things start to pull all sorts of, let's call, fun things out of their bag.
Oh, okay.
I can't say it's tricks.
Out of their death bag?
Out of their death bag, yes.
Okay.
I mean, they're still alive, so it's like a semi-death. Speaking of death bags.
Speaking of fun things brought out of a death bag, Donna Hayward.
Donna Hayward's was brought out of a death bag?
Aren't we all?
Excuse me?
In a way, isn't the womb?
No! Canonly, Donna's mother is still alive through the fiction.
Okay, I can't redeem this. I'm running out of ways to fix this. So one of the biggest points of interest for a lot of people when just talking about Fire Walk With Me is the recasting of Donna Hayward.
What?
So in this film, noticeably, everyone is the same actor, except for Moira Kelly is Donna. Not only has it been a cast member recast, it's a fairly significant one for the movie and for Laura's narrative. Arguably like the third or fourth biggest character in the Laura story.
And now, Kalil, I recall that you were taunting me for quite a bit because I was thinking to myself, and I had to ask you outright, is there something about Donna's actress? Did she change? But apparently it is more obvious than...
The first time you watched it, I wish I wouldn't have corrected you, so after 8 times, maybe you would notice. But yeah, well, the first time you watched it, you weren't 100%.
I wasn't 100%.
To
People
me,
change over time.
They have such different faces. The only way that makes sense is if she had extensive facial reconstructive surgery in like 2 years.
Or it might be a point in which, like, her family's genetic timeline says that at this age, her bone structure reshapes.
Professor, I'm going to come home one day looking like a drastically different person. You're going to just treat it like normal.
Probably.
Oh my God. I could be replaced by an imposter. They wouldn't even have to try hard.
I mean, in that respect, at the very least, we're making someone's day.
So the question then is, did David Lynch not make Laura Flynn Boyle's day? In the sense that, did Laura Flynn Boyle want to be part of this movie and was like denied, or did she not want to, or was it just a conflict of interest?
Now, as the Unplugged Professor, being newer to the series, I am the one who's less knowing of what's bound to happen, and whether or not we're going to have a third Donna, a Donna Trinity by the time of the return. But from what I can tell so far is that I think that Moira Kelly did a fantastic job for this variant on Donna. Now, when we're considering it, in this version, Donna is someone who's very doe-eyed. She is someone who is very much on the edge of this darker world that Laura Palmer stays, seeing more so of the brighter, purer areas around them.
She's peering a flashlight into the darkness, but the darkness is swallowing up that flashlight.
Between Prince Charmings and wondering if someone like Mike Nelson can do any means of poetry.
Yeah.
there is just not much really going on beyond just trying to do what she can to help a friend. Meanwhile, we have someone like Laura Flynn Boyle, who inside of Twin Peaks in the series, she seems to be more determined onto a goal, onto the path. I think that not only inside of their verbal acting, but also in their physical acting, they take up the role of what Donna needs to be. Donna is working the story, how it needs to be. So having the actor change like that, I think makes sense. I think that it works.
Mm-hmm. No, I like the change for Moira Kelly. I like her as that more innocent and a bit more reserved but curious form of Donna. That's not to say that Laura Flynn Boyle might not have been capable of that. We haven't seen her in Twin Peaks in that capacity, and I haven't seen Laura Flynn Boyle in other projects take on a character like that. But if I was asked, like, gut level, which Donna do I prefer? I prefer Moira Kelly. I'm not going to ask you to say that overall, but I think that Moira Kelly made more sense for Fire Walk With Me. Now, as far as the reasoning for why the switch even happened, we don't know. There isn't really a complete evidence. I was looking into a little bit.
Yeah.
Some theories relate to the idea that Laura Flynn Boyle was actually just busy at the time, that it was a conflict of schedules, that it wasn't that she didn't want to be in it and no one wanted to be in it, it's just that she couldn't. Because both she and Sherilyn Fenn, the actor who plays Audrey, they were both working on the film Wayne's World at the time. And it's possible that there was just a conflict and they couldn't do both.
Okay.
Another theory is that Laura Flynn Boyle did not want to do the nude scenes, which I think makes total sense. The movie has scenes in it that not every actor would be comfortable doing.
Yep.
Especially if prior she was known as the more innocent soap opera kind of character. This would be obviously quite a turn. But I don't know if that necessarily holds up much scrutiny because Laura Flynn Boyle around the same time did nude scenes in other films. Now, I didn't like go and see if they're the same level of like CD context, but I feel like generally if you're willing to do a nude scene, you're probably willing to do a different nude scene unless it was, again, very different context that made it different.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between like laying down and having a painting done with yourself Titanic style,
right,
as opposed towards this deep, like flashing lights, heavy sexualization.
Yeah.
And I would almost say that the style of sexualization, it takes some of the more heavy parts of what women are sexualized as in media as is that you really don't see in a male version of sexualization, where someone is just like thrown onto a table and just like almost idled after. So
there's a lot of power dynamics happening.
Yeah, and I think that can certainly feel uneasy with some people. So we can also consider whether or not, like, through the acting in Twin Peaks, I mean, this person's name is Laura Flynn Boyle, and she did have a scene in which that we couldn't bury you deep enough, Laura, and I can imagine having a sense of saying, like, say, for example, we couldn't bury you deep enough, Kalil, and just being like, wait, that's my name, and then that emotionally tears you. Would you be emotionally
I think
torn?
I understand your joke you're giving right now. I don't think that's the reason why she backed out of Fire Walk With Me. I don't think that's the reason.
No.
The third common thought is that there was a conflict between Boyle and either the cast members or David Lynch himself. And there's a bit on this with different people interviewing. They'll say different things. And of course, actors are people. Cast members are people. They have different opinions of other people. If you listen to one actor, you might have a very different colored experience of another actor without really being there to know the full story. So without judging for the full story, there are some cast members who have kind of complained that Laura Flynn Boyle is a bit more high maintenance in terms of personality. And when Twin Peaks was originally airing as a show, Laura Flynn Boyle was dating Kyle MacLachlan, who plays Dale Cooper.
Yes.
And that comes into points a lot because fans who wanted, or at least were curious about, the idea of Cooper being with Audrey will sometimes blame Laura Flynn Boyle because they believe that behind the scenes, she didn't want Cooper with Audrey. And it was the girlfriend kind of getting in the way. I don't think there's ever been any proof to substantiate that behind a few actors saying it. They could be right, they could be wrong. So all three of these like examples, I'm like, I don't really know. Like, was it a scheduling conflict? Was it a personality conflict? Was it a conflict with the material? I don't know if there's a definitive answer, and I don't think we ever will.
Yeah, I suppose we won't ever. It would be interesting. I don't know how their relationship was going by the end of season 2, but the fact that, like, with the Annie relationship even popping through, I'd imagine that'd also be a conflict, seeing as they're around the same age.
And I think Heather Graham was younger than Sherilyn Fenn. The actual actors were, in fact, younger. So it is a curiosity. It is a curiosity. But I guess we're both on Team Moira Kelly as far as Fire Walk With Me is concerned.
As far as Fire Walk With Me concerns, I think she fits in quite well.
So kind of looking at Donna's character in the film, she pops up in a few pretty memorable scenes consistently throughout Laura's section.
Yep.
The first one we get is what I'm just going to call a fireplace couch chat.
I mean, the first one is like walking out the door and then walking to school and
This is
just
true.
being very cheerful. And why don't they have backpacks, Kalil?
Because the cool kids carry their books in their hands.
I can't imagine. I mean, like, I was the kid who carried books on my head, but at the same time, I realized I was in the weird spot.
Yeah, probably that would be weird. I don't know why you would do that. I'd be worried about them falling. Good balance if you manage to sustain that.
Oh, that's what I practiced all the time. My head was very flat, but I cannot do it anymore, unfortunately.
That confirms a lot of theories I had about you, Professor, that I'm going to keep to myself. No, in all seriousness, though. Yeah, you're right. Technically, we did see them first on the walk. Did you have anything to say about that scene other than the backpacks?
Not too much. I think that overall it's fun to see, again, just fun little, like, chats with one another.
I mean, Mike
walking off
Nelson
to
stole
school.
the show there.
Mike the man. Yeah.
In his one appearance with, like, his one line.
Which I'm surprised they're not like, hey, jump in, we'll take you to school. No, they're just going to keep on their walk, and it's like, I'm Mike, man.
It's a very weird, like, situation if you imagine real people. Like, just, that's the conversation, then you keep walking. Like, it's just a very weird encounter.
Hey, Kalil, I'm feeling great today. And I just, like, stand as, like, walking you as you walk by. Yeah, no, it is definitely odd. I like that after they sort of separate, Laura goes off to the side and it easily communicates. Yeah, she's kind of holding things even back from what is considered to be her friend as she goes ahead and takes a little bit of a sniff in the bathroom.
And we see more of that kind of hiding the darker elements just under the surface with the couch scene. We have this sort of opening part where Laura says that nighttime is her time. And Donna retorts, that's only because you won't let me in on any of it. So the idea is pretty quickly established that Donna wants to know Laura's full story. She wants to know everything that her best friend's up to.
I mean...
But Laura differentiates nighttime. That's a no Donna zone. That's a Laura zone.
I mean, we already saw a little bit of that. There's actually been two scenes inside of that very room. Or I believe it's in that very room. One is where the fireplace is on and we have our two actresses sort of lying on couches. One's flat and one of them has, like, legs kicked up, if you will. Having a fun little conversation, you know. The innocent Donna being just like, yeah, you know what? This is great. Remember James? James is cool.
Donna calls Bobby a goon and says that James is the one. Professor, do you agree with those two statements? Is Bobby a goon and is James the one?
Bobby! Yeah, but I don't think, like, if I take on the emotional layer of what Bobby is from the diary and the movie itself, I think that, unfortunately, that was just a result from Laura, and maybe that's also going through her head as she's just sort of passively speaking to Donna. And that is something that's very unfortunate. Again, he's someone who's very submissive to the world around him. And yeah, no, it's just, sadly, Bobby's not exactly going to be fooling himself. And James, he's there.
There's kind of the idea, I think, that knowing that Donna's more of the beacon of innocence and kind of lightness, that I could see why she'd be more interested in James in a sort of naive, innocent way.
Yeah.
If Laura sided more with the James idea, James is a safer boyfriend. He's not running drugs.
James is very sweet.
Why don't you get out your violin, Professor?
James is very sweet.
James is very, very sweet.
James is very sweet. No, she ends up repeating that sentiment, almost like, again, dodging questions and dodging any further acknowledgement.
There's a
on how
mocking
great
tone
James
to it.
is.
There's a mocking tone.
Yeah, and slowly, it's almost as if as the questions sort of go on and on, after asked if Mike Nelson can even do poetry, which Laura does with a laugh, there's this point in which, like, she just shuts off, and when Donna just asks out of the blue, when you fall in space, do you think you go faster, or...
Well, okay, so we know, like, script-wise, this is one of those questions that a character asks. It's more important to get the response from Laura than it is to ask why Donna asked it. But I'm still going to ask, why would Donna think of this?
I think that it's supposed to come off as one of those little flighty questions as you're just lying on the overall couches and just kind of like asking yourself random questions. It's just something, instead of someone to taunt Laura, it's just something of a passive question. And that's when Laura, unfortunately, is tormented by this question because she has a very specific thought in which she is thinking that, no, you've when you fall in space, you fall faster and faster and faster.
Until you burst into fire.
Until you burst into fire.
Forever.
And you go so far that the angels can't even find you.
Yeah, they've all gone away. I think it's interesting. She doesn't say they can't find you. It's just that they won't help you. They wouldn't help you because they've all gone away. Yep. Is it because they can't find you because they've given up? It sounds more like a given up to me. You're too far gone that the angels aren't even going to bother.
It does, but either way, she won't be found. She's just going to be inside of space. If she is correct.
And I think what really sells a lot of this line delivery is the performance that we end up getting from Cheryl Lee. So much of it in facial emotion, body language, that, as she's saying this, eyes completely open, staring blankly, no blinking.
Yep.
And it's notable that, we see extreme close-up of Laura's face as she's answering. Donna presumably doesn't see Laura's face at all.
Yeah.
Based on the way they're lying down and kind of the looking exchanges from earlier.
Yeah.
I think on their own, the words should sound concerning. Like, Professor, if you just randomly started going that dark on something, I'd check, you good, man. And maybe Donna did. We don't hear what Donna said afterward.
I would laugh.
That had me concerned even more. I would still press and ask. Because I feel like if someone says something this, potentially dark, I think you have to kind of follow up with it and just make sure they're okay. And maybe Donna did. We don't know for sure. But Donna not having seen the facial reaction, I think it makes it more likely she just brushed it off. Because she didn't see how Laura really looked pained.
Yeah, no, I think that there certainly is probably some concern Donna has, especially with the following scenes, and maybe that's just the sort of tipping point which causes her to check in more often.
Yeah, because later we have Laura showing up at Donna's door, just crying, heavy breathing, and she asks Donna, "Are you my best friend? Are you my best friend?" And Donna's like, "Of course, what is it? What's wrong? I'm your friend always." And we don't see that full conversation develop. I am curious, this is, again, a rare defense of Dr. Hayward. I will give Mr. Chainsaw Hands the benefit of the doubt here. I think if he would have been home instead of Donna, I really think he would have sat Laura down and really had a heart-to-heart.
Yeah.
I think Doc Hayward has that personality type where he'd immediately bring her in. You want some chocolate milk? What's going on?
I think that he may have some controversial points of view. I think that there might be points he may be very wrong with, but there is very much at least a support system inside of there that can be very helpful for some people.
In a dark way, I can almost see this spinning into a situation where Doc Hayward, not really knowing what better to suggest and not really knowing the full story, I could see Doc Hayward listening, being very supportive, and then advising Laura to tell her parents about this. And you know what I mean? Really, he'd be like, "Well, a lot of people really care for you, Laura. Your father cares a lot for you." And I was just I'm screaming internally, thinking about it. But that's the way I think that conversation would go. I think Doc Hayward is the kind of guy that would think you're going through a problem, you should tell your family.
Now,
and I'm here for you, Laura, but you got to tell your parents too. If I can help you, talk to them if you want. That's what I kind of feel like he would do out of just not knowing.
Yeah. No, I can absolutely see that, and that would be a very fascinating spiral, but not in the best way.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of the Laura Palmer family, just like the general family, as well as just the facial expressions mentioned, during the auditions through David Lynch, were they just told to just do ranges of emotions with their face or
you
something?
Gotta wonder.
Stretch it out? Because no, there's been some fantastic emotion that I hardly see from any of the other characters throughout even just generally the series that is just conveyed via the face.
I really do believe that Cheryl Lee and Ray Wise probably gave the best performances out of any David Lynch film. Obviously, you can't agree or disagree with that right now.
Yep, I've seen one total David Lynch film.
Just fire walk with me. But I have seen them all. And yeah, my opinion would be these are the strongest two performances from an actor in a Lynch film.
Now, Kalil,
for me.
Can you confirm or deny, since we're going into the David Lynch catalogs soon, do the actors have faces?
Mostly.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind because, again, you say that this is some of the best facials.
Yes, there are some characters who may not have faces.
Very well.
We laugh and he doesn't know. All right, so the Roadhouse. We catch up with Donna visiting Laura at the house. So technically not the Roadhouse yet, but that's the section we're going to.
This is a house near a road.
That was a
not the
segue.
Roadhouse.
Okay, it was a segue. So they go over to Laura's house, and Laura's dressed in a more revealing top, tall black heels, obviously dressed to go somewhere.
Yep. She's all nice and ready, and just Donna's stopping by. She's coming around. She's seeing Laura, and she's asking, "Hey, why don't you pour me a drink too? And while we're at it, where are the cookies?"
So this is In a movie that has a lot of dream elements, surreal elements that even fans are confused about, newcomers are confused about, like, what's Judy? What's going on with that?
Thankfully, this is the clearest scene, though.
The biggest mystery of all of Fire Walk With Me is the conversation topic, where are the cookies? Fred and Ginger?
Which, by the way,
dancing. That is exchange of 3 replies.
now, to make this even clearer, listeners, let's go ahead and just try this again, because it's very easy to get mixed up unless you get to figure out that it is certain characters. So I will let you partake on Laura Palmer, and
Cool.
I shall be
I'll be Laura.
the Donna, okay?
'Kay.
So, where are the cookies?
Fred and Ginger?
Dancing. So, as you can tell, this is a little bit of it's a little bit of a codex.
So the best we can come up with, if you Google search Fred and Ginger, you immediately get tons of results for these dancers.
Yes.
And that's clearly what this has to be referencing, because it is just inundated with the Google searches.
Because I don't think Fred is a type of cookie.
Even when I tried to narrow it down to Twin Peaks in the search query, it's all Fred and Ginger stuff.
Yes.
I searched the Twin Peaks Reddit. I can't find anything involving Fred and Ginger, or everything with cookies was all about people making cookies with Twin Peaks designs on them.
Yes.
It's not about this scene. Maybe we're just missing something, but I do not see people asking what this means. Are we baffled?
I think we're less baffled now because through some of our re-recordings and even our conversation today, if we had to guess, there is no parents around. So that's be an interesting
It's the
one.
most
It'd be
obvious
important to
thing.
wonder where they're at, because one of the conversations Donna immediately brings up is the fact that how much her mother ends up smoking. So to have a conversation, parents lead to conversation with parents, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they're asking, hey, where are the cookies?
The only people who are not there, who normally would be at the Palmer household, are the parents.
Now, why they're called cookies, we don't really understand.
That's the part I'm confused about.
Now, Kalil, I have a few things to propose, all right? Okay? So, for one, we could consider them cookies because just like their relationship, if you leave them out for too long, they grow stale, which I think that has been thoroughly described in things such as the book. The other one is just the concern about how many times Leland Palmer has dunked Sarah Palmer into milk.
So I'm going to milk this opportunity to segue into more talking about the events of the show.
But yes,
So
regardless, likely cookies, I can imagine. Parents, they are off dancing because it seems that Donna has some acknowledgement that, yeah, it's dancing. Otherwise, yeah, this is
baffling dialogue.
Baffling.
And considering Leland Palmer's history with dancing, it raises questions, but I don't know.
He's just getting
I don't know
to
where
know
to go
her.
with it.
He's just getting to know her.
Laura says she'll call Donna tomorrow, but Donna decides to follow Laura, unbeknownst to Laura at the moment. Laura goes over to the Roadhouse, a.k.a. the Big Bang Bar. Not Big Bang. A.k.a. the Bang Bang Bar, and Donna appears later.
I mean, the big bangs may happen.
Donna watches as 2 men in plaid sit down at Laura's table and pay her.
After Jock directs them in that direction.
Yes.
It seems that they might be live bait, they might be someone who's just been generally planned. But regardless, it seems that Jock is in somewhat control.
I think if
here.
anyone's the bait here, it's probably Laura, not the 2 men.
They are... who's the bait? Who's the fisherman? Where's the money? Honestly, there's all sorts of ways you can throw this metaphor all around. I just wanted fishing.
And in the conversation that ensues, which, we don't know for sure how much Donna can hear at first. Donna eventually walks over, but before Donna makes it over there, she asks if they want to have sex with the homecoming queen, to which she gets the reply from, I believe it's Buck. We find out later his name. You do go all the way, don't you, little girl? And she replies, sooner or later. Rather ominous wording. I mean, obviously what he means is go all the way sexually.
Yeah.
But considering where this movie ends and considering the darkness of everything, I think the idea of sooner or later I go all the way has some darker tones.
Yeah, no. And with overall just her reaction to this man being something very potentially arousing to him as she gets really fierce. A few minutes after bawling her eyes off through this performance that's happening in the background, Donna, seeing these mixes of emotions, steps forward up to the plate.
Mixes of emotions basking in the light of blue and red mixing.
I don't think Donna really cares about the color coordination.
I'm just saying, for the viewer standpoint, it's a mixing of two emotions with two colors. So Donna, I like her line here. When she shows up, she says, "Let's boogie." I like "let's boogie." It's a really good terminology for the situation. And the man, of course, asks if she's part of the deal. Laura says that she isn't, rather forcefully, like, "Donna, stay out of this." But Donna takes, again, to use your term, takes the bait here, takes the shot, wipes her mouth with her sleeve, and the song ends. Laura starts making out with one of the two men, almost just kind of like daring Donna on, like, "All right, this is the point of no return, Donna. I'm doing this." And Donna, again, follows what Laura's doing, makes out with the other gentleman there. Probably not a gentleman. The other creep there. And she rises to meet Laura's challenge, which gets an, "Okay, Donna, let's go."
Canada. Yes.
Meanwhile, one Canada later, we are in what is called the Pink Room.
Now, I know we're talking about Donna, but let's the thing with the Pink Room that fascinates me is that it's in Canada, it seems, just from their dialogue that happens afterwards. So they leap over the border.
That is the alleged idea.
They likely have drove hours because Twin Peaks is like somewhere in the middle of Washington, right? So they're leaping over the border. Jock is there before them.
Yeah, no, this is supposedly a bar in Canada, like near the border. I called it the Pink Room a moment ago. That's, I guess, apparently the name of the song that plays during it, which is how I mainly, when I think of this place, I think of the music. But I looked up on the Twin Peaks wiki. It's called Power and Glory, or The Power and the Glory.
Yep.
I don't know where that name was given. I don't know if it's in like the script maybe or something, but The Power and the Glory is where they went.
Well, I don't want to know where people are putting their power or their glory inside this place. But regardless...
Jock.
Like, seriously, like, we saw him. He was at the late end of the shift over at the Roadhouse, right? And he's, like, serving up these people and moving them. But they arrive at the...
Power and the Glory.
And they're just like, "Welcome to Canada." And Jock's already there. He's heavily drugged up, likely intoxicated.
Everything.
Like, so that implies one of two different things. Because time had to pass, so they had to make their way over there. Either A, not only did, like, Jock close up, but he hurried over there, got incredibly ready for their arrival, and was, like, down already by the time that they got there to his great went mode. Or he, on the way, got really frigged up.
Wasted.
And made it all the way over there. So, either way... I'm impressed, but not
in a good way.
Not in a good way.
It raises a lot of questions if we're meant to read into it. I mean, how far is the Bang Bang Bar Roadhouse from this place?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not just next door. It's quite a distance. And it was already night when they went to the Bang Bang Bar. What time is it even at this point? There's so many questions involving timing of how Jacques beat them. And what were Laura and Donna doing in the meantime? Like,
they were playing Scrabble.
Don't say that around me. Whatever board games they were playing on the drive, they eventually get there, and the Power and the Glory seems to be a place where pretty much exclusively you play very, very, very loud blues rock, having like a disorienting amount of flashing lights and noise. This movie should have probably had an epilepsy warning at the start. And I don't know how commonplace it was in the 90s for movies to even acknowledge that, but this is a lot to take in, I imagine, if you have those sort of issues.
Yep.
And thankfully, you and I do not.
We do not, but even with like the modern standards with the Blu-ray and so on, there's no warning whatsoever.
No. And again, even especially for re-releases, I wish that would have been done. To critique the release, not necessarily the film itself, but the release.
Yeah.
And in the situation we're encountering here, we have topless, naked dancers everywhere.
Primarily female.
I think they're all women. I don't think there's a single male dancer I saw.
Yeah, I don't want to say for sure because someone might be able to point one out, but there's just not enough man pecs.
And it's definitely a place then that caters toward people who are interested in women, and particularly a more power dynamic sense. I mean, that's the Power and the Power and Glory, I guess. It's that dynamic of almost like living out this power fantasy of you being the sort of stronger masculine presence over these women, at least in this particular occasion. So I don't think it's trying to cater to the Manpec audience. I think that this is a place that's clearly catering toward a more fetishization of the female anatomy, especially younger women. And obviously this place is not it's either very, very illegal or it doesn't care at all about the fact that underage children are here as well. And as everything is going on, the music is drowning out the words. I've seen some debate online about whether Lynch initially wanted subtitles or not. Yeah. I haven't done my research on that. I could see that being an issue for Lynch because I feel like he generally doesn't want to make his films that accessible. Mm-hmm. He just wants the film to be pure artistic vision. Mm-hmm. Do you like the fact that the subtitles are automatically included on the screen for the Pink Room, Power and Glory, or do you wish that they weren't automatically there?
Now, mind you, not all of them are there. Like, only what's, I imagine, were deemed most important.
Probably the scripted lines. I'm not sure if everything that was said was even in the script.
Now, I imagine that there might be something of it in the script. Say, for example, when Laura's trying to take away Donna, that is primarily not subtitled in the same way as things such as the Great Went dialogue, in which I find that is probably one of the more important scenes.
So do you wish it had been subtitled?
It's hard to say. Like, there's all sorts of moods that you can kind of play around with that, and I always like finding hidden nooks and crannies. So,
because
with
by
things such as
having
subtitles.
By having it not subtitled as a default, it would make it so that it's very hard to hear the words, which adds to the difficulty of understanding the situation.
But
it makes it even more disorienting.
But the disorienting factor, it fits so well with the overall scenes that they are in. Meanwhile, having less disorienting elements, if you will, having these subtitles go through, yes, you can engage yourself more inside of the personal dilemmas that go through. It's very much dependent on whether or not you want something that fits better for a mood setter or if you want something that fits better for a narrative.
It's also one of those funny situations, too, where if you are watching this either as someone who has hearing difficulties or someone who does not speak English as your fluent language, you need the subtitles to understand it anyway. Yeah. So, like, if you were watching this and you spoke Japanese, because, again, it was popular in Japan, this would have to be subtitled. Mm-hmm. And it would have to be subtitled the same way as any line that normally you could hear. Even Gordon Cole can hear some of those lines, but it has to be subtitled if it's not your first language.
Now, some foreign films have them dubbed over, so...
That's true. But I'm just saying that this is an interesting problem that's unique if you know the language. If you know the language and do not have a hearing impairment, I could see the experience improved by not having subtitles in this moment, which is a strange, not very common situation to have. And there's one moment of subtitling way later when we have, like, toward the end, the Garmonbozia. That subtitle, like, straight out tells you information.
Yes.
It puts next to Garmonbozia that it's pain and sorrow.
Yes.
Which is also weird because that doesn't feel like Lynch to not only put subtitles in there automatically for reverse speech, but then also to give information in the subtitle that you can't hear.
Yeah, honestly, the first viewing of it, it was just like that, almost like a little bit of a chuckle of a thought inside my head. It's like, neat.
But yeah, as you think about it, it's like, Lynch, why would you allow that to happen? I wonder if there was a little bit of pressure to do that, or, again, just curious thing here.
He's throwing us bones. Like, there was a scene earlier with Chet Desmond, and we can say later on, maybe this is just another bone. We have two bones to drum along with in order to meet the beat of this film, and maybe find out what the full melody truly is over time.
Could you communicate what you mean by the bones?
The bones.
What do you mean by that? I don't understand.
He threw us a bone.
Threw us a bone? So it's like, I'm going to give you a clue. Boys. So you're referring to the Lil dancer. You just said Chet Desmond. You mean like Lil specifically?
The conversation Chet Desmond had about Lil, but yes.
Okay, so this is something he's going to give us as an explanation. Curious.
Not an explanation, but a key. A bone. Bone key. Skeleton key.
So Jacques, he's hanging around.
He's there. He is present. Well, he's not all present, but he is. His physical body is there.
He says he's not Jacques.
He is not Jacques.
I am the Great Went. Which Laura replies, I am the Muffin. Which then leads into the sexual innuendo of what a muffin you got.
Everyone knows the story of the Great Went and the muffin.
So could you tell me what you think it means then when Jacques says I'm the Great Went?
I believe that, as far as it goes, it's a position of pride mixed in with the idea, I'm imagining, since I couldn't find any sort of Great Wents through history that would match up too well, he's far gone.
Yeah, I'm on the same page that he's just gone. Like, he is so far gone, he is so not here, he is gone and went.
Yep.
I've also seen some people link this to the sexual meaning, because if you have gone somewhere, you could say that you came there. So there is a sense of sexualization. I don't read into that as much, because I think that's, like, less obvious. I think it's more he's just far gone. But if you wanted to interpret it as a sexual thing,
He never does any sexual things. He's very literal, especially with his high school sandwiches.
It kind of brings to mind also Laura Palmer Diary that Jacques was portrayed as a lot more of a sensitive soul and more willing to actually kind of help out Laura. And you even see a little bit of that. He's so disoriented, obviously, with everything that he's on. Yeah. But once Laura starts going after Donna and bringing her out, Jacques like bumbles after and like does help. Mm-hmm. He clearly is out of his like mind right now, but his instinct is to help the girls.
Yes.
I would like that if it wasn't for the fact that, again, he is probably preying on this child sexually.
Yep.
That it is indefensible.
Like, he seems like in the story of Twin Peaks, the TV series, to almost be second to Leo Johnson. But when you look into things such as like the family hierarchy, as well as just the overall reactions he ends up giving through this film, I believe that overall, no, Jacques was probably on top, and Leo was just another part of that plan.
Jacques' the one that kind of calls the shot on Bobby.
Yeah.
You could tell that Jacques probably knew that he was sending Bobby to his death by sending in that...
He probably ended up, like, again, he had to make a call and arrange everything.
Well, and sending in the deputy from Deer Meadow, which on my first viewing, I remember not even realizing that was the deputy. He kind of looks like the guy that was the Mountie in the original Twin Peaks show.
But that kind of doesn't help, seeing as, the Mountie kind of is alive through the TV show.
The Mountie's alive, but no, the sending in someone who clearly is armed and dangerous. If Leo kills someone not on order, it's probably because he got reckless and he just wanted to kill someone. But I feel like if it's a decision, it's probably made from Jacques. Jacques' the one who has the Canadian connections. The Renault
Canadian connections.
Well, the Renault family is the family smuggling the drugs in from the border.
You can almost say the connections.
I can hardly think of a reply to that. So yeah, I think that the Renault family has more power in the fact that they're the ones supplying the trade. It's almost like a division, I imagine, where Renault's at the top acquiring the drugs. Then Leo is the one who makes sure that the drugs go to the people on the ground floor in Washington, or maybe even in the tri-state area for all we know, who are going to then bring the drugs around. And then people like Bobby are the little urchins who like actually do the drug sales. All for the sake of people like Laura. And there's also Ronette. She appears in the dance floor, I guess we'll call this place, with a passing of a single blue light bulb across the screen. Given the effects of color and that the blue light bulb is shown to be emitting a sort of blue electricity, I think it's interesting that Ronette is identified with it. It's like the appearance of Ronette is this charged, different kind of energy source. Is it better? Is it worse? I don't really know. But it's different.
Well, let's look at it in this sort of respect. It probably is worse. If we take Ronette on the later implications when she escapes, a ring falls off from her. Meanwhile, Laura, by the end, puts on the ring. Like, that she gains that said ring by the end. So she might have, at one point, been very, very far gone, almost to the point of too far gone.
This is kind of a strange observation, and bear with me if it seems kind of extreme.
I only have to. I do this podcast with you.
I think you could make a case that the blue light, at certain points, if not most of the time, could represent the idea of almost like an omen of what's going to happen in the future. So that could be neither positive nor negative. It's just fate.
So basically, as we keep on seeing it, it's that whom in the distance.
Because I think the idea of Ronette being associated with it, and how many times you see flashing lights when like Bob appears, or like near the end, there's so much bluish, whitish light. It's almost like the calling of an angel or the future. Not necessarily good, not necessarily bad, although for Laura, it obviously is ominous.
Yeah.
But it's the coming of something inevitable. And if I go on the meta angle, viewers in the Fire Walk With Me movie, having watched the show, the number one thing people know about Twin Peaks is that it's about someone named Laura Palmer who died. So you kind of go into the movie expecting that to happen. And if I make a weird comparison here to a video game, because we do that a lot for some reason.
Why?
There was, in the recent history, a remake of a video game called Final Fantasy VII.
Yes.
And in the Final Fantasy VII remake, it has this meta element where there are these kind of phantom-looking creatures that appear in scenes likely to, if not confirmed to, make sure that the story happens the same way in the remake as it did in the original game.
Yes.
It's almost like a visualization of the pressure to fulfill an audience's expectation. I kind of think of the blue light almost as that at the moment. And again, my feelings change, my thoughts change. Fire Walk With Me is the kind of movie you could watch it 8 times and come up with new angles, which is, very important for Robert Angles, I'm sure.
I was thinking to myself, every time you say angles, you say it a lot in this podcast, I immediately want to keep saying like Robert Angles, but I hold myself back, and now you do. The beast has been released, so now we cannot stop.
Scrutinize my idea.
I will scrutinize your idea because I find the use of electricity very apt in the respect that, let's take the context of something such as the book, if you will, The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer. Now, when Bob is not so present is oftentimes when Laura Palmer is taking more action. But as she sort of ends up sort of falling back and falling into some of these habits, Bob becomes more and more present. You can almost say that in some respects, things such as drugs, such as what happens with the Black Lodge and how we're getting more and more connections to electricity and the static and fuzz, I'm imagining as something that's Imagine something very passive. Someone sitting in front of that overall fuzz and so on. Someone who watches that fuzz that is happening on the TV. Obviously, the direct action that can fix this problem is just turn off the TV, change the channel, fix the reception. These are active roles. Those who will not change that and leave it on will oftentimes be inactive, someone that won't even bother with the situation. I think that people stuck inside of Ronat's situation as well as Laura's situation are those who have the frizz stuck on and are just sitting in front of the set, not really taking action to change these poorer portions of their life. And slowly, that darker element is making them more and more susceptible to Black Lodge's antics.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could meet us in the middle and maybe say that if it's not pure fate, if it's not pure evil, it's the sense of in the middle, which is danger. That something's about to happen. Because after we see the light bulb in Ronette, you can hear more, I think, in the audio, that sort of electric crackle, especially when Laura sees Donna in a very vulnerable position on the table.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that sense of danger heightening and that sense of escalation that correlates with electricity as well. I don't know, just interesting. As far as, there's also a repurposing here when Laura's with Ronette.
Oh, yeah.
The gesture of the snapping fingers and pointing downward that we saw in the series finale is reutilized here. This is something I really, really enjoy the concept of. I like when something is recontextualized and reordered in a new way that retroactively casts light on what it meant before. I don't think it meant the same thing before that it means now. I don't think that was Laura saying to Coop, hey, come down over here. I think it's a different meaning, but I like that it's being reused and reformed.
I think that the use of it definitely shows a bit more, again, of that power dynamic of something in which is requested of someone. But, of course, in different ways. It's also very fascinating that she does that snap while she is inside of this overall mode, this very passive mode, and taking in the drugs. And I would say a very important moment in her life before something very important for her to stop, if you will, occurs inside the background. And that is that one person really having a good time with Donna after she's been actively drugged in this area. This is where she sort of gets up, starts moving into that overall situation, and just is trying to get him off of her and try to move her. Now, the context of it, the verbally spoken item is that she is wearing something of Laura's, but I do think that it's in a double meaning in which it's not,
for sure.
It's not like the sense of like, no, you have this piece of clothing on me, now it has to stop. No, she is wearing Laura's persona. She's wearing what she is doing here, and she does not want that to happen to Donna, especially with the hidden line at the end in which it's not Donna, you.
Hidden, I mean, it's like screamed. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's not subtitled.
It's not subtitled. Not you,
but
Donna.
yeah, I mean, it's that idea that Laura has, and you can analyze it however you wish, that she views Donna as someone who is naive and innocent and wouldn't understand, but also Laura wants to keep her that way.
Yeah.
Laura sort of, especially, again, the diary's coming into mind with all this stuff, is the idea, even implied in the film, though, that Donna's place is the daytime, is the safe time. I being Laura, do not want Donna to run the risk of being in danger like I am. Yeah. And also, Laura has so much guilt over herself, especially in the diary, that she doesn't want Donna to have to live with that guilt too.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that Laura never backs away from this lifestyle. And if we go by the diary as canon, she actually finds a lot of solace and kind of escape from her pain through the sexuality. At the same time, she recognizes it's not something she wants for Donna. And it might even be that Laura's trying to compensate in some way by treating Donna as this sort of pure, quote unquote, self. Laura's able to kind of like keep an element of herself kind of away from it. Like there's a little compartmentalized section of her day when she's with Donna that is good. And it's almost like a selfish motivation that, no, Donna, you got to stay Donna. You're not supposed to be Laura. It's interesting. Before we leave this particular area.
Can we please leave soon? I don't want to be in this uncomfortable place.
One very important point that you brought up last podcast is that this is also where Jacques Renault, kind of on accident, lets slip a crucial detail as far as Teresa Banks' death.
Yep.
That she had been inquiring about the fathers and what the fathers looked like of the different people that, like Laura and Ronette, it sounds like specifically. So Teresa Banks had put one and one together that Leland was hesitant to engage with the three of them.
Yeah.
And she's like, something spooked him. I wonder if the fathers of either of these two happen to look like this guy. So Teresa Banks definitely put one and one together. And you can almost imagine that Leland/Bob caught wind of the idea that blackmail was going to come soon, or already was on his doorstep, that they were going to try to get money out of Leland, and he was instead going to kill her.
After all, like, if we even consider just the general business that Jacques Renault ends up having, who knows, maybe he would have even had something on the side as well to kind of, like, get this little bit of extra information out, so...
We have an interesting scene later on, and I think what might be the last Donna appearance in the narrative of the movie is that we have a scene where Donna and Laura are talking the next day.
Yep.
And as they're kind of talking through things, the "I don't want you to wear my stuff" line is said. They kind of exchange those lines. You know, "I love you, Donna, but I don't want you to be like me." We then have Leland come into the room. And when Leland comes in, he's like smiling. He's happy to see his daughter and his daughter's best friend. But then we get a snapshot of what is Leland's point of view, presumably. Is the image then, instead of Donna and Laura, we see it interplayed over with the scene of Laura with Ronette back at the hotel.
Yeah, as they're holding on to one another. So.
In a sort of mirroring posture, but one obviously much more sexualized based on the context and the clothing.
Yes.
So I think that scene is really effective. Going back to Moira Kelly being a good casting, I think Moira Kelly's face looks more like Ronette's face than I think Laura Flynn Boyle's. I know to you, they're all indistinguishable for some reason, but to me, I think that casting made the mirroring very effective.
Yes.
Because if you squint your eyes, they do look very similar.
Yep, if you close your eyes and imagine them in the same position, they also
squint, not
look.
close.
But I also enjoy the scene that immediately, like, as soon as he sort of sees it, he's just like, "Hey, Laura, we're late for breakfast. We should get going." And he's like, "Yep, no, thank you, goodbye." And just like, "Thank you." And just like leaves her out. But then like he gives one stern look straight at Donna as this final like interaction. And it is very, so good. So good.
If you were Donna, just imagine you're like, this is my best friend's dad, okay?
Yeah.
And you're sitting there on the couch and you see that look from your best friend's dad. Would you think much of it? Like, what would you be thinking?
I think I would hide in my room, such as like what Donna likely did, because hey, we don't really see her that much afterwards anymore.
So, do you think Donna should have gotten the creeps from Leland, based on like the interactions we do see of them? I'm just curious.
I think that she should have. Well, obviously stayed away because of what we know happens with Leland. But I think that it definitely will add some confusion. Like, did I do something wrong? Like, does he know what happened last night?
Yeah.
Do I know what happened last night?
Right. I think Donna being in such a confused state also makes sense why she wouldn't think too much of it, because she's not all fully with it at the moment.
Yeah.
She's dealing with, at the very least, a hangover, if not of epic proportions, considering that whatever was slipped into that drink, this is someone who never had engaged in that kind of activity before. That would hit her like a 10-pound... I was going to say a 10-pound truck. A 10-pound truck would be very, very, very lightweight. I don't even know what that means.
If you throw a 10-pound truck, sure.
It's like a little, I guess it'd be like, it's like bigger than a Hot Wheels, but like Tonka, a 10-pound Tonka truck.
That's a hefty Tonka.
That's a very,
That's a ton of Tonka.
I don't know what's a 10-pound truck. Everything's either too light or too heavy to be 10 pounds.
So, everyone, listeners, if you know where we can find a 10-pound truck, please email us at snakeeyedreams@gmail.com or tweet us at snakeeyedreams1, the numeral 1.
As in 10-pound truck. So Bobby's another recurring character, thankfully not recast. I'm really glad that Dana Ashbrook remained Bobby. We talked a little bit about the Mike the Snake Nelson scene at the beginning. I don't have anything more to say about that if you don't.
I mean, he is also not recast. Just imagine if, like, everyone was recast here. Every single member.
That would be very strange. Gordon Cole even is recast.
Yeah.
We see Bobby at school. He approaches the glass casing that's in front of the photo of Laura and gives that a big old smooch.
Oh, yeah.
And what force in that smooch? He just like sucks in that glass.
Why not? Like, again, like during their time just seeing Laura Palmer and just being reminded of Laura Palmer, you have to kiss the glass for Laura Palmer. In fact, for the amount of like attraction people are given to Laura Palmer, just imagine how many other people are kissing that glass.
I think lips are the least of our concerns of what touched that glass.
I think that we should be very concerned. After all, like, who knows what might be on store that. Like, just imagine like how many lips have touched it, how many lips have consumed other bits of material. Bobby needs to stay healthy.
I will say that I think this is a good example of making a lot of use out of a limited amount of time, that the forcefulness of his kiss on the glass is exaggerated enough that it gives us a really clear idea of his feelings on Laura. Since as fans of the show, we never saw Bobby around Laura. She was already dead before it happened. And if anything, the pilot kind of makes it really confusing what he actually felt. Because one of his first reactions to hearing Laura died is defensiveness. It's like, you think I killed Laura? She loved me. And like, it's just like this really defensive, ridiculous response that it's not entirely clear if he did love Laura in the show at first. So I think that the exaggerated kiss was actually very effective.
Yeah, no, Bobby is full of life and he exaggerates all its emotions.
Later on, he depicts some of that sort of stereotypical boyfriend jealousy where he catches up to Laura and he asks, where have you been? And kind of, she just dodges the subject. She says she was standing right behind him, but he was too dumb to turn around, which you could tell the anger on his face as she says that. She eventually softens him up by just like smiling, "Come on, Bobby." And then eventually Bobby breaks through. He just kind of lets it go, smiles, says he loves her. Laura blows the kiss. And when they're walking away, Bobby's doing this jogging motion backwards. Great jogging. Great, like, tracking shot of Bobby going back into the school with the music rising in.
There's something about Laura Palmer that I still imagine that she is somewhat magical between her mother's abilities and the way that she made Bobby have this complete 180 incomplete personality. She probably knows him well enough. She probably knows things that kind of go through. But this seems like a very interesting method.
I mean, it's heightened reality. A lot of Twin Peaks is heightened reality. It's things that you would see normally exaggerated, right? You might see someone in high school with a girlfriend they really love, and they're like really excited about their girlfriend, and they do a little bit of a dance. This is obviously way more than that.
Yes, honestly, again, heightened reality. I believe that more if, say, for example, this was like Donna, if this was like Audrey, if this was Shelley Johnson, if like a mood was be able to shift 180. Laura Palmer's mother sees horses and is able to speak for the Red Room. I believe she might have some power.
Okay.
But no, he does this very like eccentric dance, just like flipping around, moving around, heading straight back to school while everyone moves away.
Yeah.
As this very nice deep jam sort of goes on in the background that he's just grooving out to Audrey style. So it seems that he's having suddenly a great ecstatic time.
And he thinks that he'd have a greater, more ecstatic time if he could just have his football filled.
Yep.
And if he could find Santa Claus.
Yep. Football, Santa Claus, both the same thing.
Well, we know the football from the show is where the drugs are stored.
Yep.
And Santa Claus, I think of the idea of someone who gives gifts.
Associated with snow,
a white powdery variety, now, perhaps?
Sure, but that's fine. But just imagine, say, for example, they're using code to not be tracked onto the phone.
It's not a very good code. It's not a normal conversation to have.
Just Andy on the other side is like, what? Santa? Football?
Okay, if it was Andy on the other side, I think they might get away with it just because they could probably trick Andy. Hate to say it. If it was Hawk on the other side, though, that's rough.
That's rough, bud.
Leo says, no, sorry, sir. My well-respected gentleman friend, who I definitely do not suspect is sleeping with my wife, you already owe me $5,000. And then Bobby, deeply hurt. Are you telling me there's no such thing as Santa Claus?
Bobby, I have some bad news for you.
So the bad news escalates toward Bobby calling Jacques at the Roadhouse.
Yep.
Jacques issuing out some lines that... Desperate, baby. Yeah, maybe, Bobby, baby, maybe.
Maybe, Bobby.
For $10K,
Bite the bullet,
which is a
Bobby.
small amount of money for a high school student in the 90s.
Yeah, after how much he already owes Leo
Yes.
Johnson.
For $10K, he has a friend who he has what he wants. His stuff is the best. 2 days, midnight, near the sound of sawing wood. Two things about the sawing wood. One, that means that it is 2 days. We can confirm a timetable in Twin Peaks.
2 out of the 7 days in which Laura Palmer will die.
And then the sound of sawing wood, this is jumping ahead a little bit. When we get over there, they're not quite at the sound of sawing wood. They're just like near the sound of sawing wood.
Yeah, no, it looks like they're unsawing the wood inside the plant. After all, the smoke is going right back into the building.
That's what I was going to mention. Is the second thing is that you noticed this time, not before, but this time we noticed that when the smoke is coming out, it's actually receding into the smokestack.
Yep.
Which is obviously a very purposeful effect to reverse it.
After all, we don't want it to look... It looked more natural when we put the smoke back in, so we had to reverse the clip.
Which, again, it's like... Why that scene? Did it just look cool and David Lynch said, I like that. It gives a good feeling of danger. And that's it. Is that all we're supposed to do? Because I don't remember there being a lot of other reverse scenes outside of Red Room,
Backwards
Lodge
knee
Spirits,
slapping.
a reverse knee slap. Why this part? I mean, smoke, fire.
Yeah.
That's the best I can do.
Fire smoke with me.
So they're not smoking, but we do get Bobby and Laura engaging in drug-related activities prior to what is an important business transaction. You're about to go in the middle of the woods at night in the scary, spooky darkness woods that are known to be haunted for $10,000 of drugs, and you're just getting high off your own supply.
I'm glad that they also brought around some very nice flashlights that look like eyes wandering through the woods.
Owl eyes, very specifically.
Owl eyes.
Distinct lack of owls in this movie.
Distinct lack of owls?
I feel like it's
Are
almost...
there?
I feel
If
like
they're
it's
not what they seem.
I kind of like this because I've commented before that they overdid the owls for me too much.
No such thing.
This movie has the right amount of owls in that none are physically there.
I need to find something like an owl postcard of the day club just to send directly to you, just so that you can understand the importance of the owls.
I think they killed the subtlety is the problem. They killed the subtlety by ooh, dude, people like when we talked about the owls being not what they seem. Let's just do that.
I mean, if you choose one route or another, go for both.
I just wish it would have been handled in a way that made it more interesting when it happened by having fewer instances of it. To me, it fizzled out by having too much of it, and I'm glad we had a little bit of a break. Speaking of things happening again and again, Bobby killed a man.
Yep.
Again.
Yep.
Like we mentioned earlier with the diary, is it the same man? No, but at the same point, this could be in the movie version, it's kind of retconning the book's version of it with a new version. It's kind of strange. This is Deputy Cliff Howard from Deer Meadow.
Killing 1 to 2 people, and this second or first person is certainly a very interesting figure if we put it into the context of all the shady goings on in Deerwood Meadow and possibly where some money might be trickling in and that they may be holding away. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah. So it is an interesting kind of callback to one of the very few points that the stuff in Deer Meadow intersects with the Laura story.
I can see this man getting more involved with someone, at the very least as a lackey to Jock. I can't imagine Jock speaking to Cable directly.
I do like the idea of there being very few connections between the first 30 minutes and the rest, but this being one of them. I like that. It doesn't bring attention to the fact that it's a connection because Laura and Bobby don't know he's from Deer Meadow.
Why would they?
So I kind of like that it's a subtle, yep, this movie is connected. It is.
Special delivery from Deer Meadows.
I know this is kind of harsh, but I think when you're getting into things like Twin Peaks, you have to be willing to just enjoy dark sense of humor. Obviously, we're sensitive to things that need to be sensitive. But even last pod, we were joking about the Teresa Banks thing. Not because we find it funny she died, but just the dark comedy of just jumping into that so abruptly. We got a giggle out of this. I have to admit, in a dark sense of humor, I find the coked out Laura here, I found a pine cone, Bobby. I like it. I think it really sells.
Look at the dirt. Look at the pine cone.
Like, don't do cocaine. It's a bad thing to do.
Yes.
I am officially unendorsing cocaine. I'm the opposite of Sigmund Freud.
Dang, no, Kalil, stop. We need the cocaine sponsor. We need to get the cocaine sponsor for the podcast.
Welcome to Twin Peaks Wonderful Strange Logcast, brought to you by cocaine.
Just the
I'm
concept.
Kalil. But yeah, no, obviously the drugs are bad, but I do find the acting from Cheryl Lee being that characterization, it's funny, and you can kind of get the sense of why Laura like sought out that feeling when the rest of her life felt so like closed in and dreary and ominous that this lets her escape from all of that. So when she's like all of a sudden out of nowhere, like, Bobby, you killed Mike. And, you know, Bobby's just, this isn't effing Mike.
Is this Mike?
Bobby, you realize what you did?
You killed Mike.
Bobby.
Bobby, you killed Mike.
And I think that really works. Like, it's such an interesting mix of emotions. Like, I find it funny to watch.
Yes.
But also, like, I'm thinking of Bobby's perspective, how disorienting and disturbing that is, and how far gone they both are. Like, it's such a mix of comedy with, like, actually, this is terrible.
Now, let's get some cookies and do a little song and dance here. Now, as far as it goes, Bobby and Mike Nelson,
Yes.
we've gone over very specific names, very strange things. This movie, we're going over weird how some timelines match up with, especially with things like Annie and Cooper.
Yeah.
Is it possible that perhaps things might not go well for Bobby and Mike in the future?
I mean, as far as the future goes...
Do you believe that Bobby will grow out some hair, also probably change ethnicity mildly, and then also be ready for the murder?
My understanding is that...
And killing of the Mike.
You think...
And somehow Mike removes his arm at one point and then converts to Christianity.
So in The Return, you're expecting Bobby Briggs to be Bob.
No.
No?
It's in the future, and Bob still has some gray hair. Mike Nelson has some gray hair. This is about 25 years. Maybe they'll have that gray hair by then. Maybe we'll get another, like, The Return of the Return coming in 20 years later beyond that. And yeah, maybe then. I'm not expecting it right at The Return, but maybe inside somewhere in the future so that my conspiracies can feel all sorts of right.
The distance of future past, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Yeah. The last scene we have with Bobby in Fire Walk with Me, I really like the scene, is Bobby and Laura on the couch. It's a pretty brief moment. We see that they are opening up, kind of like kissing, but Laura's just like, screw this, I just want the drugs. And Bobby is like, you really don't want me, do you? You're really only here for the blow. But
don't worry.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Bobby's got it. I really like that sort of nuanced emotion that Bobby, yeah, he's a bit of an idiot in some ways. He's a loud, obnoxious person that, yeah, if you went to school with Bobby, he would be really annoying. He's like some football jock guy who's like one of the guys, but he's like super like obnoxious. He sells drugs to everyone. You wouldn't want to be around him. But there is a sense of subtlety and sentimentality that like he understands Laura and he's not even really judging her. Mm-hmm. He looks at Laura like he legitimately loves Laura in the kind of way that you could almost say is like unconditional. That he looks at Laura for all the totality that she is, and he just wants to help her. Now, I would raise issue in the fact that I don't think friends help each other by giving each other hard drugs. I don't think he's helping her. Mm-hmm. I think Bobby thinks he's helping her, though, and that's the important thing. In Bobby's brain, this is helping Laura, and he's doing what he can to help her. That's reading it charitably. I guess you could read into it that it's not even helping. He just knows that Laura will pretend to be his girlfriend and maybe have sex with him if he gives her drugs. So you can maybe view it as like a trade. But I like to think he's doing it out of love.
I think that overall, Bobby is certainly complex in different ways, but I do think that there is something of a acceptance of where they are now. I don't even think that Bobby would even expect to maybe even see Laura the next day, seeing as what had happened that night, on how much even blow that he had in the first place and how much blow he can even get at this point. So I think that there's just a mutual understanding that only gets strengthened more by, again, the book.
Mm-hmm. One thing I don't think we needed the book or the movie really to convey to us is that James is the one. That James Hurley is cool. Is James Hurley cool, Professor?
No.
So James Hurley,
No.
awkward as ever. He is just like at school. He's just standing there, catches Laura at the stairs. Laura gives this weird, like, wide-eyed glare, then it fades out. Later, we see Laura's coming out of the shower.
Wait, before that, like James is like waiting there, but it's not just waiting. He's waiting with one foot up on some unknown object.
Yes, that's what I was getting at.
In a sweet, sweet stance, and he's just like looking down, thinking to himself. He has so many thoughts inside of his head. It's just so hard to be a teenager. Thick music plays inside the background. Somewhere off into the distance, there's a title card for a completely different show centered around James Hurley and how just like there's teen love in the air, there's romance, but he's just got to find that sweet sense of love. He is the Prince in Charming armor. He is the one in which must be able to make all the love and romance that is necessary for his character arc to be fully developed. James Hurley, man.
The James Hurley show would last one season.
James Hurley show would be canceled before it starts.
It'd be on, like...
CW.
It'd be one season long. There'd be some fan fiction out there.
Yeah.
A lot of, like, Reader X James Hurley fan fiction. And it would have its fans, but it would definitely not stay on the air. Not that Twin Peaks lasted much better. Twin Peaks got 2 seasons. So, make it that way you will. But no, I mean, I definitely get the sense that James is trying to be cool. And it's never clear, like, did David Lynch think James was cool? Is this what, did he look at James Hurley and go, this is my James Dean rockin' 50s biker kid. He is super smooth and hot and just cool. Or was David Lynch like, LOL, I'm going to be a little ironic and put this doofus over here?
James is only pure in the respects of he is clueless and he just kind of like lets things happen around him. Like, again, I'm one who is on, like, Team Evelyn arc because at least it adds some complexities to him. But still, he's not really a great guy. He's kind of like, I think that he's pretty aware about his situation being with Laura Palmer, and I'm pretty sure it's an open, like, idea that Laura Palmer is with Bobby.
Yeah.
There are points where he lets his emotions go off too strongly on him, in which he doesn't really attest to or apologize for. It's just, again, he's in his own little world for the most part.
He's a side boy toy. He's like a male version of Donna for Laura. Like this little innocent little thing. This little innocent babe
innocent.
in the woods.
No, don't say innocent.
To Laura's standards and Laura's view,
to Laura's standards?
Someone who's not associated with the drugs, someone who's not associated with like Leo and Jacques and the sex stuff that's going on there. Yeah, he's a compartmentalized tiny little slice of normalcy in her world.
He's a little slice of normalcy that, again, very much should know that he is actively cheating on a person and trying to pull her away from that situation.
I think he's still like a garbage person in some regards. You could take the stance he's a teenager, he's growing, blah blah blah.
Yeah, no, he's learning, he's growing. He's going to be judged on a different standard if he's in the return by what I would see. Because again, he's clueless for the most part, but it still does not take away that I do not like ideas like, again, pure or innocent or...
He seems that way to Laura.
It softens him too much, I see, and I don't know if even, like... And I know with Laura's perspective, he probably is much softer.
Can I say the term naive?
You can say naive all you want.
Would you say he's naive?
I will say that he is very, very, very naive. Naive is basically inside of his character description.
Then we can use that word as a mutual meeting in the middle point.
Okay.
Because if you want, again, I gotta say what I think Laura's viewing him as. I think Laura views him as innocent, leaning into the sense of dumb and naive.
Yes.
And to whatever degree we agree with that description, it's kind of beside the point for what Laura thinks.
I have to let out some of this frustration rage because I can't tell this to Laura or Donna on screen, as I have heard this on loop again and again and again on what James is.
Because, like, he opens up with this conversation about how, like, no, it does matter. We're in love. Like, he views, at least the way he talks, and I think he genuinely thinks it, that the love he has between Laura and himself is so strong, so overwhelming, that it just covers up everything else.
Sure.
And it's such a misguided viewpoint and misunderstands Laura as a person.
Yeah.
So much that it's like, maybe at best you're like a nice little like Dairy Queen visit once a week. that you're like this sugary, sweet little thing that she can like eat and then go on with her day. I don't think that he realizes that, no, he's not a redemptive force.
Yeah, we all know that ice cream does not pair well with turkey.
I'm gone. Long gone. Like a turkey in the corn. I do like the turkey conversation. The difficulty, I would imagine, for Cheryl Lee and again, James Marshall, to give the James Hurley actor some credit, to actually pull off serious emotion with gobble, gobble, gobble and reacting to the turkey conversation.
Now, mind you, just remember that Turkey in the Corn is a song sung by Lightning Hopkins inside of a blues album by the name of Country Blues.
What year?
1959.
1959. Okay, right at the cusp of the 60s. And then as we kind of end that conversation, the camera pans downward as...
It pounds downwards.
Well,
intensely.
Pounding might happen depending on what you think happens next. Anyway, to keep this school appropriate and age appropriate and PG for our dear listeners.
I mean, we had Sex in the Clouds from Disney, so I think that we can just say that they definitely pounded.
Sex in the Clouds?
Yeah, Aladdin.
What are you talking about? Oh, that's okay. You're taking the leaves saying sex from the Lion King, right? Because there's nothing. I don't think Aladdin has that.
I'm pretty sure Aladdin has that. Let me see. Oh no, Aladdin asks for someone to take off their clothes.
I think that's just mishearing a line. Disney, okay. The Disney sex things are usually like things taken out of context. I don't buy into it. Moving on. At the Palmer house, later on in the movie, we get a honkety honk from the Bickety Bikeroonie. That's what my notes say. I just had to say it. James is honking his motorcycle horn.
Yep.
And he asks where Laura was last night. They're supposed to get together. And kind of like with Bobby, as soon as Laura just like starts to dodge it, he just lets her dodge the whole thing. And James, kind of says, you're on something again. Hey, when can I see you next? So like, there's a little bit of concern, like, Laura, you're on that drugs again. Anyway, when can we hang out again?
You're on that drugs.
And Leland's just standing ominously at the stairs. If you were James Hurley, first of all, look at your life. Second thing, how would you feel about Leland Palmer? Your secret girlfriend's dad.
I mean, in the context of like what happened, like what James knows, I would just probably react similar to just like acknowledge and cut the conversation short. If I knew what Leland Palmer was all about, I'd immediately like just start vrooming. I don't care if the ignition is on. I'm getting out of there.
You're just saying vroom, vroom,
I'm
vroom.
Just saying vroom, vroom, vroom,
as you
vroom.
run away on your feet.
Yep. Just waddling over. I mean, it'll make you seem less of a threat and possibly dissuade him from chasing after you. So,
do you think James, if he would have known what Leland was, what would he have done? Like, do you think he would have ran away? Do you think he would have tried punching Laura's dad? Like, would he tell the cops? Like, what do you think he would do?
If we're going on this very heavy romance, gotta do what you gotta do attitude that we've seen from him, I think he tried to get Laura Palmer out of the situation, try to take him away.
Run away with me.
Yep.
Which Laura would refuse.
Yep.
What would he then do? Just drive away? Like,
I think at that point he might try to take matters into his own hands.
Yeah, I can't see him, based on the way that he and Donna reacted to Laura's death and did their own investigation, I can't see him going to the police. I can't even see him going to his dad, Big Ed. I feel like, he would go his own rogue way. Maybe the Bookhouse boy, Joey Paulson, would help him out. Yeah,
no, and I suppose there's just like not too much he can really rely on other than himself for whatever reason. But no, it would certainly take that romantic angle, I think.
Then the last section we have of James here in the movie is James calling Laura and saying he wanted to meet her. She does agree, see him in 15 minutes. And as soon as she says that on the phone, she's like, God, why did I say that?
Yeah, she's just speaking into a phone, box of electricity, if you will, in which we've seen phone wires.
It has a little ring.
Little ring.
And they go out to meet at night, and James asks, what's wrong with us? I mean, we have everything. Which, again, if only you realized what Laura Palmer's life is like, I don't think we have everything is really the situation, actually.
When I think of James Hurley and I think about Laura Palmer, they have everything with one another. Absolutely everything. We saw James Hurley in every single scene in this movie. Everything.
And then Laura even starts mocking him when he's like, Laura, like just even mocking his tone. She slaps him, and then James just kind of looks up and smiles.
And then just kind of chews on his little gums and so on. It's almost as if he's just getting challenged, and he's like, okay.
Well, and it's almost like James is able to reconcile all this by just saying, almost, I wonder, to himself more than Laura, you always hurt the ones you love. Like this kind of deep aphorism that explains the situation. I don't know if that's what it is. And then she says, the ones you pity. Say whatever you want. I know you love me, and I love you.
And truly, honestly, when you have this sort of sense of love, you kind of see yourself sort of jumping back into ideas that maybe Major Briggs even had, in the sense of, is love even enough? Because around this point of fondness and this point of love and admiration, that is around the point in which Laura Palmer ends up screaming quite loudly and staring off vacantly in a direction.
And we never know what she's screaming at.
No, we don't know what she's screaming at. It's almost as if a lot of the fondness had overall just sort of been lost in her eyes. She had at that point given up on it, and no amount of reaching, no matter what sort of romantic idea, no matter what CW magic is hidden within James himself, unfortunately, there's no quite going back with Laura. After all, she at one point goes into deeper dialogue, just trying to even maybe snap James out of this romantic reality into the reality they're present in right now, being like, Bobby killed a guy, and James is just like, what? Bobby didn't kill anybody. What? He's like, want to see it? As if to mention you want to see the body. He's like, well, see, what are you talking about? Let's see what? It's like, James, follow the conversation. It's almost as if he's so stuck in that he's not even following on into the real things that are happening in Laura Palmer's life, as if he can only exist in these sweeter moments.
I can't really say this charitably. I think that James is someone who has very much rose-tinted glasses toward Laura, and I don't think he allows in his head any of the possibilities of what Laura's life is actually like.
Yeah.
And not only that, he doesn't really listen to her or pay attention to her.
Guys, this is the Wonderful and Strange James Sucks podcast.
It's like he doesn't take her seriously enough. And granted, for all he knows, she's on cocaine right now. For all he knows, she is talking crazy. But he doesn't really listen to even give her a chance to explain herself. He's just gonna, tell her no, that didn't happen. Come on. He doesn't even listen to what she's about to say.
Yeah.
And I think that's, for how much he professes he loves Laura, what does he love about her? What does he really love about Laura other than her body?
Hair smells nice, remember?
Yeah, it's just, it makes you really feel like he doesn't know her. At least Bobby, I genuinely think, came to know Laura, and he had been crushing on Laura for years, according to the diary. I believe Bobby's feelings, while very mixed, very confusing, and at points dangerous, they're sincere.
There's a fictional level of love in which James exists in. It's that, again, this very soap opera element in which love is pure, love is amorphous, but people keep on saying love, but no one really kind of gets deeper into what love really is. It's just almost like a bit of dressing when it comes down to when the tougher issues come through, when the chips are down. Who knows what's even going to go through James's head in the first place? We say that he's going to chase down Leland, but it's almost as if, I think our thoughts are only led by the idea of this random idea of love, this very love as the big fat letters rather than the passion that actually is in it.
What's love got to do with it?
A lot.
At the very least, just listen to this person you claim to love, because when she brings up when she starts screaming and bring up the Bobby killed someone, this is right after she just suddenly pulled away from James and said out loud, he might kill you. Mm-hmm. And James doesn't wonder who that is or what that is. He doesn't even perceive that possibility of taking that seriously.
Not in this world.
And it's yeah, like you said before with the slap, she's doing anything she can to get James to listen, to the extent that at one point she just she says, "What about this, James?" then flips him off, and James's response is to kiss her. He just keeps coming back with the same sort of retort of love will always win, love will always win, love will always win, I love you. And he just doesn't seem to pay attention. At which point, Laura, realizing there's just no hope, like, I'm not going to get through to this kid. I think you should take me home now. Then we end up with Laura going on the motorcycle, and before she can actually get home, though, at some point later in the future, we don't really know how much later it is, Laura stumbles off the motorcycle, just starts screaming, "Don't, just don't." We don't know if James did something to provoke that, because it kind of cuts early into that scene.
Yeah.
But she runs off after hugging, saying, "I love you, James." You have this really loud, like, Laura Palmer theme playing, and she just runs into the woods. And James's response, instead of going after her, instead of letting the parents know, "Hey, your daughter ran off into the woods, this might be kind of bad," he just waits for a light to hit red and then revs up his motorcycle and drives through the red light. I don't think James went through a lot of emotions during the main series about Laura and kind of getting over that, but he always, like, veered into relationships with Donna or Maddie as, like, almost like an emotional crutch. I don't think he ever dealt with the guilt in any serious way. And that's the truth for a lot of Twin Peaks characters that really struggled to deal with their own complicit nature in it. Bobby at least was the one at the funeral saying, "Guys, she was crying out for help and no one did anything. You didn't do anything and I didn't do anything." At least Bobby realizes that. James is so busy running from everything, I don't think he realizes, like, yeah, you really weren't there for Laura, were you?
I mean, just a note, go and stop are the only ones really written on the stoplight. So it might be...
Fight or flight.
It could be a fight or flight. I'm thinking to myself that when it's at the point where it's the lights almost demand him to say go, and when time is running thin, and he just quickly drives off during that point before, like, the light fully turns red to say stop, he's ignoring the signs in more ways than one. It's almost as if, like, the world is telling him, wait, and just, like, trying to, like, compel him to one thing. But again, he ignores all of them. He ignores what Laura's trying to tell him. He ignores what's exactly happening in his periphery that could actually save a life. And he just goes on with his.
Do you think that James is a well-written character in the movie?
James is a well-written plot and idea in the movie. I will not go as far to call him a character, because
he is a character.
He is something of a force inside the film, in which if you told me to say 3 things I know about James, all of them could be covered in his last scene, and it's very, very quick. So I think that I get more out of every single other member of the cast than I do James.
Okay. That's some strong words from you,
That's some
Professor.
strong words. You can test me on it if you'd like.
Is that true for the show as well?
No.
Okay.
Because I can say all sorts of things, but most of them are explicitives from the show.
Do you find James is at the bottom of the barrel in terms of characters you get a lot out of from the show?
He gets area of forgiveness because of being a child. But for the most part, James is someone who is very self-absorbed without owning up to it.
Yeah.
Like, for the most part, I think that we can even say that Bobby even ends up recognizing his flaws, reconciling, and even just sort of speaking things out. Meanwhile, James, he's in his own bubble. Things like, no, this is what I have to do. I've got to go on forward. This is what I feel. But no, James lacks so much self-awareness.
I think it'd be really interesting if we would have got it either in the show or the movie, even just one scene extra with James and Ed or James and Nadine, because those are his parental figures at home. He does not have his mother or biological father around. I feel like if we would have had him with Ed or Nadine, we get a sense of what is his home life like, because we know what Donna's like with Doc Hayward. We know what Bobby's like with Major Briggs. I feel like a heart-to-heart between Ed and James would be very stilted.
I don't think that James has been inside of the Ed household for more than, like, 30 seconds. It seems like he's only existed in, like, the opening entryway of the house before running right back out after delivering some lines.
I really think that would do a lot to flesh him out, though, as a character. It would really do a lot to kind of give us context for who and what he is. We get that with every other, like, kid character, really. Like,
he's already fleshed out, but the thing is, he's fleshed out into this romantic archetype. He only exists inside of the soap opera element of the show.
The James Dean.
The James, oh my Dean. No, honestly, there's not much really complex of James, except for his lack of complexities, leads to complexities. Meanwhile, we have someone who we still don't exactly have all the answers for in his mess of a mind. Why don't we go ahead and check in on Harold Smith, because no one else will, now that everyone's gone. Actually, he's dead now. Oh, no. Kalil, save me, please.
No salvation.
Oh, no.
No salvation. I will say, I mentioned before, I really like Harold. I find Harold to be one of the better new characters of season 2. I've really enjoyed his characterization in the show, the book, and now the movie. I think it's interesting for how much David Lynch has said, like, he doesn't like season 2. I think his problems are mostly late season 2, but it's still the fact that he included Harold in the movie at all, I think is worth note. I don't think he had to. I don't think he had to any more than he would have had to include Johnny Horn, who he didn't. I think Johnny Horn and Harold are both equally valid to be in this movie. But I like the fact that he did choose to shoot a scene with Harold, and it got in the movie. I don't remember or know if there's more missing pieces with Harold. But I thought that, even though it's a small section, it gives more context for where the diary comes from in terms of when Donna later finds it. It gives more context for Harold and Laura's dynamic, even if I still think I kind of preferred the way the book articulated it more than I do the movie. And it's just nice to see the character again. It's nice to see him. I think that even though he doesn't have a lot of lines, he does a lot with the facial reactions to kind of show that sense of intrigue and deep empathy with Harold. Good stuff.
Good stuff.
What'd you think of the scene?
Overall, with the scene with Harold, it definitely puts on a very sad light, seeing as another bit of his support is sort of thrown away. I imagine he just hasn't really gotten that, especially since what's suggested from the book is that, thanks to Laura, Meals on Wheels is even a thing.
Right.
So having now Harold to be alone, only to have Donna sort of come by later on, and him sort of latching on to Donna so much, it is very fitting, sadly fitting. I think that Harold does a fantastic performance, just trying to follow along with Laura, despite the fact that she's sort of coming in and out, and also showing the intensity of Laura Palmer, because this is the one scene in which we do see Laura sort of get that white makeup, black lipstick, similar to how Leland does even later in the film, a very mirrored state.
It kind of enhances what I already mentioned in the book podcast episode, where you sense that Laura is very much a predator toward Harold, and that if there's any kind of sign of no return morally for Laura, at least for me, it's how she reacts to Harold and what she does to Harold. And this almost, to me, is foreshadowing that if there was a branching path and Laura would have gone the route of being possessed by Bob or allowing Bob in, whatever you imagine Bob is even like in a person, I think Harold's one of the people most in danger.
Yeah.
I don't know if she would kill Harold or if he would just be a little tortured side thing. But the fact that Harold is so neatly tucked away from the world, he's in a unique position that Laura Palmer could do some real damage to him, and I don't know how much help he could get from anywhere else. He would be someone that she could use and toy with however she wants. And to the entity of Bob, that's a very scary thought. What would Bob do to someone who doesn't leave their own house?
I mean,
that's scary.
Yeah, I mean, we get an idea if you believe that that's one of the ways Harold may have ended, but...
At this point, are you more on the side that Harold did die by suicide or that there were supernatural elements, or 50-50?
I am very much onto the side of supernatural elements. Maybe even less like the general supernatural elements. I mean, he was stuck basically on his own out in the open. And meanwhile, there's also Leland Palmer, who seems to be very intense into his crimes, and yet not as much can be found on them. It's almost as if somehow a lot of the damage he does gets muted in the actions.
I guess you could argue that he didn't put a finger under Jacques' nail, even though Leland did kill Jacques. So even if Leland had killed Harold and then shortly after killed Maddie, he doesn't seem to leave fingers under the male adult victims.
He doesn't wrap them up. He doesn't throw them into rivers. They are not his set of flowers that
not
he's
his
setting
MO.
adrift.
His modus operandi.
Yeah. It is just...
So it could be. There's also the middle ground option where it might have been death by suicide, but through the spirits maneuvering it almost. Like feeding on his sorrow and pain and exploiting that and leading him to a point. So it's hard to really know either way. One line that I think is really interesting from the movie is where at the beginning of the conversation, Laura talks about how Bob is kind of getting closer and getting around her. And Harold, says Bob is not real. Harold's like first response to Laura thinking that Bob might have been the one to mess with the diary is that Bob is not real. It calls into question, like, how much of the diary has he read up to this point? How many stories has Laura given him? Because I think you and I came away from the diary of Laura Palmer as written. Bob definitely seemed real. If he was a mental construct, you don't tell them, oh, your mental construct isn't real. Like, it's either physically real or it is as real as any other like thing she sees in her life, even if it is in her mind.
Yeah.
Like, it is such a big presence. So for Harold to be like, Bob is not real, it brings to mind we comment about James not really listening. Although I think Harold is a bit different than that.
It seems like something actually clicks in his head, or at the very least he pays respects to her as she is like sharing the information.
Well, Laura drops a bombshell, or should I say a Bob shell, in the form of kind of revealing that, yeah, he's been having me since I was 12. So I think that at that moment, Harold is either like believing her or at least realizing that she believes this enough that I need to back off. You would think Harold might have a bit more of an open mind than a lot of other people in Laura's life to like believe these things, but maybe not. Who knows? I just think his immediate response of saying Bob is not real does put a little bit of damage into his empathy and into his listening abilities, because you don't just say that to her. Like, even if you think Bob isn't real and she's making it up, it's clearly real to her. You need to respect that, I think.
It might have also just been a general slip of tongue, as like he's like the intention might have been there trying to calm her down and so on. So the first thing that comes to his mind, he just like tries to assure her, and like, he's not real. But I don't think that he put much thought into it inside the moment. I think it was a lot of just passionate speaking, if anything. It's also, Harold has heard a lot about Bob, and it's how much elements onto the supernatural you even like give into. He might be fully convinced that Bob is an idea. We might be in the Rosenfeld territory of Bob. Bob complicates things. It
could be the situation of a friend trying to reassure, like, it's okay. The boogeyman's not under your bed. Like, it's okay. There's nothing in your closet. That sort of tone of like, it's a little patronizing to some degree, but it's that tone of like, don't worry, it's not real. What you're going through, it's not real. And it's a little bit problematic, because if you say that in the wrong situation, that's kind of rejecting their truth. It's not listening to them.
Yep, he got the negative effect on that social link, and because Bob is in fact hiding behind the lamp. Very poorly.
He is, in fact. One line also that's pretty interesting here is that Laura says Bob wants to be her or he'll kill her.
Yeah.
That line I feel is really significant, at least to my understanding of Bob, because it's not always 100% clear if Bob has motivation in the human logical sense, but this part seems to be a pretty like clear statement of Bob's intent. Yeah. If I can't have you, you're dead.
It's not even just that, because it's the sense of having her is the first thing you think of. It's that surface level of like, this is a possession. But no, it's not possession.
Be.
It is to be.
I want to taste through your mouth, which I think is a very, again, chilling line that showcases Bob wants to hop. Now, can Bob like duplicate like a sponge and like separate and be in Leland and be in Laura at the same time?
I mean, like we've seen in the lodge where we can possibly assume that Leland and Bob are omnipresent in one another.
It raises questions.
But we've never seen anything outside in the real world in Twin Peaks if like multiple people can take up multiple hosts.
Yeah.
Is it a sense in which most of Mike is truly in Philip Gerard? Or is there a possibility where there might be most of Mike presence elsewhere?
In the physical world of Twin Peaks, we haven't seen any evidence of a spirit possessing more than one person.
Yes.
Or having more than one host.
At the same
Possessing and
time.
host are not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah.
It's still, even after this movie, it's still dubious exactly to what extent Leland is controlling / being controlled / being switched on and off by Bob.
I think that this movie certainly tries to lay more empathy and pity onto the Leland end of it.
That's interesting. What makes you think that?
Later on in this, these overall scenes after scenes after scenes after scenes, there is a point where Leland Palmer, clutching the diary notes of Laura Palmer, states that, I always thought you knew it was me.
Yeah.
And then Bob goes on, it's like, I never knew you knew it was me. As if like one is like the idea of like an abstract thought on just like, I thought you would put the blame on me. But this end of Bob is just like saying outright is like, I never knew that you knew it. Like,
Yeah.
I never knew that you knew the answer. And just playing with that. There's also a point in which Leland cries out no, begs for the things to stop.
Don't make me do this.
There's a point where Leland ends up, after like calming down after the moments in which he comes up to Laura and says, I love you. So it feels like Leland is very far gone, that he cannot separate himself from Bob, but there's still enough trying to call out.
Yeah, I mean, that also supports what Bob said in the episode Twin Peaks we didn't quite like, where, Leland is as innocent as a babe in the woods. Like, during this whole situation, like, Leland is only fleetingly aware of the situation and then seems to be immediately, like, brought out just enough to feel some pain over what's happening and then shoved back into the darkness of his subconscious.
I think that's the thing. At this point, Leland seems to be someone who is, again, desperately trying to claw out and saying no, and there is a strong presence of Bob. But we also have to ask again, what exactly is Bob? And since he is so much powerfully inside of Leland and trying to reach out to Laura, and how come he can't fully get to Laura?
Yeah.
We have to also sort of consider what is up with Leland, and if, even though he does disassociate himself with his Bob character, how much do we still have to like place it onto him for these things that sort of continue in his life without much control? I imagine that there is enough inside the memories buried through and this strange power of Bob that his memories don't fully click, but there must be some areas of inconsistencies amongst this madness that he plays in, that there could be possibly more action he might have to take for himself, these steps that he has to do to tend to himself. I mean, in Laura Palmer's case, she is younger. She is in the early ends of adulthood, late ends of teenhood, that there is no real escape. If she were to escape, she would likely be brought back home. Leland, yes, again, Bob may be very much controlling this, but what is Leland doing for himself to help better himself or aid to himself? We know that he's on Benjamin Horne's side as his legal defense. He's into some dark stuff already.
Yeah.
So what is he doing for himself other than trying to, I suppose, posture himself as the good, loving father figure?
I've mentioned before, I think you have to look somewhere in the middle. It's not all Bob, it's not all Leland. It has to be somewhere in the middle. It has to be somewhat supernatural and somewhat psychological. And I think it's again, gotta be both. I think it's fun to look at both sides in separation, but the answers to me have always been both. And I think about that moment where Leland says, don't make me do this, which would imply that in that moment, Leland knows he's about to kill Laura. But then when you watch the pilot, you get Leland's reaction with, like, he's brought out of, like, Benjamin's meeting or whatever, and you see his reaction on the phone, and you see his reaction with Sheriff Truman. Are we led to believe that in that moment, does Leland remember having killed Laura or not? How many layers are in this man's mind of what he knows and what he remembers versus what he's blocking?
For the sheer amount of him breaking and being stuck throughout the season, I imagine that it's a fight again.
Yeah.
At the end of the series of Leland.
Yeah.
There's a point where Bob even like states that he's going to let Leland remember everything that happened.
Pull the plug.
Meanwhile, Leland's not fully control of himself in these memories ends up just falling back into that bit of despair for himself. Beforehand, we could see that Leland is just sad, just like he can't really operate for himself. And when he can actually reoperate, it's that whole entire opposite end onto his character. He's going wild. His hair is turned white. This is combat in motion with just identity with this man.
Yeah, especially when you rewatch Twin Peaks, there's so much going on, presumably under the surface on Leland's character, that is part of the beauty of the writing of his character, that he is always that ambiguous idea of, the evil that men do, right? Bob, how much of that do we pin on this man? How much do we not? Again, I don't think his hands are clean. I don't think you can be fully clean in this situation, but it does make you wonder how much of this is Bob acting on his own will, or is Bob merely lowering the inhibitions on Leland and then wiping the memory afterward?
And meanwhile, you also have to sort of think to yourself with this, like, from what you had told me before, like, apparently, like, Bob was someone and the killer was someone that may have not been fully contextualized
in the international pilot.
International pilot.
Which we will watch.
And David Lynch, I believe I remember you saying, didn't really want to reveal the killer at all.
No, David Lynch has gone on record numerous times saying that he didn't want to ever reveal the killer of Laura Palmer, that the moment they revealed the killer of Laura Palmer is where they killed the golden goose.
If there's anything that I gotta say about that is that I am very thankful we got to see Ray Wise flex.
I am as well.
In this other reality that we would not see those sort of moments, I'm just wondering if there even would be a fire walk with me, if there would even be a sense where we can even play around with Leland being more than miserable and just broken.
I think you and I are largely in agreement on these topics, that it wasn't so much the killing. It's not so much revealing who the killer of Laura Palmer was that was an issue. I think you and I were more just upset with how it was handled following the reveal of the killer immediately afterward. And I know for myself, I would have wanted to have more of Ray Wise in the show. So I think it would have been fun to play around with more episodes where we knew he was the killer, but Coop didn't. It's interesting how much then Leland has agency as a character in even just Fire Walk With Me. We see Bob grabbing Laura Palmer's diary from presumably Laura's perspective. We see Leland leave the house.
We don't even see necessarily him grabbing the diary. He's lurking.
He's lurking.
Like it's assumed that he's going for the diary, especially with a few cryptic messages. But otherwise, you could otherwise say he's either lurking for the diary or he's just waiting for Laura to come by because he knows how to push those overall mental muscles he needs to.
Which, in terms of Laura's reaction then to this, her decision to run out of the house, smart move. Hide, smart move. Hide out in the open, directly near the bushes, but not really in the bushes.
On the hill.
Just awkwardly on the hill to anyone who drives by, walks by, or in the case of, Leland, is just there and could have looked over.
Yeah, but he doesn't. He walks out of the house and it seems like something clicks inside of Laura's head being like, no. Just like a quick means of a mental, wanting to get away from this button, abort button. And it's just world shattering for her in the moment.
Also, when we see Bob there creeping, we get a really big close-up to his uvula, which I thought was an interesting decision.
Yeah.
Did you read into that at all, or why in the mouth?
Bob wants to consume. Bob wants to eat through people's mouths.
That's true.
Hey,
you know what? Are we all a little bit like Bob in that way?
No!
Are we not all consumers who just want to eat through people's mouths?
I don't want to eat through your mouth, Kalil. You do not eat good food.
Excuse me?
You do not.
Well, I wouldn't want to eat through your mouth because I'm vegetarian.
Your loss.
Your gain.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Crap. Speaking of dinner, we had a great scene at the dinner table in this movie where the family was all together, and I guess I don't want to run through the whole entire thing, but there's so much nuance going on with how Ray Wise and Cheryl Lee are not only navigating their own characters, but playing off each other. I imagine someone at the Cannes Film Festival who has never seen Twin Peaks and doesn't really know the context might be left a little bit like, what? Maybe a little bit. I don't know if I'd outright boo if I was at the Cannes Film Festival, like a lot of people apparently did.
If there was someone amongst the crowd inside of the festival watching this film and looking at Leland Palmer as he's talking to Laura Palmer, and then go back into the show and be like, you know what, I'll check this out. And then found this very, very sad man for about half a series. What I'm trying to say is that this would be a very fascinating introduction to this pair of characters. For sure.
And I've heard people watch Fire Walk With Me before the show because chronologically it makes sense to do that. But it really does color your perception of Leland. Obviously it colors your perception of a lot of characters, but I think Leland's one of the ones that's got to be the most changed, knowing what he is, knowing what he's gone through.
Yeah.
And when you have those moments of Bob taking over, or if not taking over, the moments where Leland/Bob puts up less of a guard, hides it less almost, you can see that so much here, where even when Laura enters the dining room area, he's like, "Hi, honey, how's Donna? School? Sit down. Sit down." So it's this rapid question, doesn't have time to even answer, and then he just repeats himself.
May I also mention that on the table, while they're having this first table-side chat, there's salt and pepper shaker, and the salt is running out, but the pepper is quite full.
That's going to be not enough salt in your food. It's going to be
it-
too much pepper.
It means that there might be a little bit of that little, the overall, and the salt is running out. The color that is used for purity in this series, the white little salt, it's running out. It's running out.
But but cocaine's also white and granular.
Yeah, but it doesn't go good on toast.
I won't argue with you there. I can't say I've had it, but I won't argue with you there. Then we have the washing hands section.
Like, look, your hands are so dirty. The conversation gets more and more tense during this, that he just grabs her hands roughly and just like, look at your hands, look underneath these nails, and just like shoves the nail where the letter would be in her face.
So you got foreshadowing for the letter. You also have this sort of preoccupation with filth versus clean.
Filthy.
Which, we keep going back to the diary so much, but it has to.
Girl.
It has to. Because there's that idea in the diary that she feels like she's dirty and rotten to the point of not really even being presentable.
And if there's anything that Bob can poke and prod.
Yeah, that he knows. There's a point later when he's talking with Sarah Palmer at the dinner table. He says, how would you know what Laura wants? How would you know what Laura likes? And I can't help but hear that Bob tone of like, Bob going inside, I know what Laura likes. And it's this sort of menacing implication that's never quite brought up at the dinner table, right? But it's the implication of Leland knows what Laura likes, he thinks. Mm-hmm. That's concerning.
Yeah, and speaking of concerning, it seems that Sarah Palmer is quite concerned on what is transpiring at the
she
table.
detects pretty much immediately the awkward, controlling shift in Leland. Obviously, we talked about Sarah Palmer being drugged in the past and in the future of this movie. In moments like these at the dinner table, what do you think Sarah Palmer thinks?
I think that there's just a lot of, again, seeing this amount of control, seeing this amount of push, it seems that all that she can really do is stand from afar and scream. Mm-hmm. There's just this point where he like grabs onto the necklace and he's like, oh, look, is this from your lover? And just like she's stumbling, she is like jittery, and she's like, they don't call them lovers, Leland. And it's like, oh, this isn't from Bobby. It's like, defensive again, in that lack of feeling control but still trying to at least take a stand. He's like, what, why would you know what that at all? It's just like, and as he keeps escalating and he just pinches her cheeks, she does outright shout, stop it, almost as if like she were the one attacked in the moment.
Well, and I think there's a weird sort of almost darkened version of the nuclear family going on here. I don't want to stretch it too much, but
everyone being perfect, everyone being high points of society.
Well, almost the father as the patriarch of the household, because I could see a scene playing out sort of like this with a little kid who is refusing to do what they're supposed to do, and the dad says, I'll sit down, but not one of us is going to have anything to eat until Billy over here decides to do what he's supposed to do. And it's supposed to, like, guilt the kid into doing the right thing. But instead it's this really creepy version of, like, fine, I'll sit down, but not one of us is going to eat. That includes my wife, who I'm controlling right now, unless Laura goes and washes her hands.
Yep.
And that dirt underneath the nail, deep in there. And it's this sense of fatherhood here being portrayed as this very controlling, not just of the child, but of the wife, and the sort of sense of father knows best being taken to the worst possible conclusions. Mm-hmm. And you sort of see this taxing element on Sarah Palmer later that night, presumably after they ate dinner, where Sarah Palmer is in front of their mirror and she's just, as usual, smoking, like chain smoking. And there's this distant look on her face. Lots of cigarettes in the ashtray in front of her. You get this sense that the amount of cigarettes in her household is a measurement of the amount of stuff she's not going to think about right now. And the stuff she's going to just not let into her mind.
And probably one of the most important like moments inside the film for myself also is happening in that same bedroom. They're not talking. They're not reconciling anything. Again, everything's silent in that room. But as like Leland Palmer is just emphasizing a deep amount of anger and just for like frustration and just heat, you see that just slowly shrink down into a sense of despair, sadness, concern, as like something looks like it's completely broken.
Have you ever seen one of those old school style like sad clown portraits?
Sad clown portraits?
Yeah.
No, I've seen like them just like, I've seen like this parody of the image before, but
Yeah.
I've never outright seen a true sad clown picture.
So, little insight into my childhood. My grandmother's house, I stayed in one of the bedrooms whenever I was over there. She had a portrait of the sad clown type look. It was like a black picture with almost like not neon, but very bright in contrast coloration depicting a clown, not quite abstractly, but it was very stylized, and it was terrifying because at night you could see the colors of the green and like the clown face, and he's just this sad, depressed looking clown staring directly across from the bed.
Kalil, how is it that in this podcast that both of us describe our grandmother's rooms in which we end up seeing something horrifying in?
We have a hole to dig to bury the sad clowns and the dolls.
No, she worked so hard. I don't know if your grandmother worked hard.
I think she got it from a friend.
I think she got it from that.
Yeah.
That's okay. Mine worked for these dolls, whether or not you're frightened of them or not.
So yeah, when I mentioned the sad clown portrait, forgot who brought this point up. Leland's face is contorted in a sort of exaggerated type of sadness.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a sad clown, which is interesting.
Yeah, and this sad clown.
Is it an act? Is it like over dramatized sadness because it's a mask, right? Or do you think that that's actually sincerely the sadness of Leland?
The scene that follows just further muddies and complicates things because he goes over to Laura Palmer after like this rather traumatizing moment.
Yeah.
And it's him saying that he loves her.
He takes her hand and says that too.
Yeah.
But
Which
this
is
time, instead of like burrowing into her nails, he just kind of holds it.
Now, you could say that this is to, again, psychologically cause harm onto Laura Palmer by like trying to feed in a little bit of
whiplash.
hope in order to like further like knock things down later. Or you could say that this is one of the few final moments, these calm moments of Leland Palmer speaking to his daughter, at least almost saying like goodbye at a moment and just saying, I love you. I'm feeling more on the latter because of the drive that we have later on. We actually see a much more calm Leland, which is in the interim of all these sort of scenes. This is a moment where Leland can be here, Leland can breathe. And that, I think, makes things even sadder, if anything.
Well, and this is where I also think that it works very beautifully in terms of the writing, is that a lot of times with very toxic people and abusers, you can't tell when it's genuine kindness and when it's manipulation.
Yeah.
And I think there's a very strong temptation for someone who's been in a toxic or abusive relationship to try to cling on to those moments where things were good.
Yeah.
And you have to get out of that trap. Like, you have to get out of this trap of trying to rationalize, they used to be so good. They used to care. When it comes to someone this manipulative, obviously this is supernatural we're talking here, but in real life, when someone's this level of manipulative, you can never know for sure if they were meaning well or not. And at a certain point, it almost doesn't matter. That's the tough thing, is that I think it works here that we don't know if this was really Leland being sincere or if this was another mask, if Leland even knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Because when you get to be this level of manipulation and this level of mentally torturing someone, your sense of what's real and what's not, it becomes obscured to the point that it's better off not even trying to play that game. You know?
It's a complicated mess of emotions that we don't even know how much agency either a person experiencing that or even the fictional characters are experiencing that is just, it's definitely channeled at the very least from our subjective viewing on it.
Yeah, and his last words before he leaves, with Laura Palmer's theme playing in the background, he says, "Good night, princess," which ties into the book stuff a little bit with the idea of the princess as well.
Yeah.
That harkens to a younger, more childlike area of Laura's life.
Yeah.
It's around this time we also get, I think, our first shot of the angel painting on Laura's wall. We have two children eating at a table and a third child approaching the table with a plate. There's a cat on a bench next to a doll. And then, notably, an angel is dishing out food to the children. So, I don't think this is a reference to like a real-world painting. I'm assuming this is made for the film.
Potentially, I leave it up to the Twin Peaks fans to find something.
And I mean, either way, is there anything else in the painting other than the angel that stood out to you? Like anything you want to analyze here?
Nothing that I really want to analyze at the moment, just because there are some bits of angel iconography. I think.
If we go by 3 children at a table, two are sitting down, one is about to get food. I think if you were to try to directly connect that to anyone, the closest 3 I could think of would be the situation of Laura, Ronette, and possibly Teresa, in the sense of the 3 victims of Bob, and the sense that they were all so young when they died. But I don't know if I'm being led to interpret it that literally.
Yeah.
I think if the children are anyone, those are the 3 it would be. And then as far as the cat on the bench, we know there's a cat that Laura Palmer had when she was much younger. That kind of ties into the sort of dreamlike angel childhood idea. Otherwise...
Where's the horse, though?
Where is
the horse?
Maybe the horse is the food they're serving.
Oh, no.
I'm vegetarian. Why do I make these jokes? Then there's the angel. Again, the most obviously important thing here. And Laura looks up to the painting and asks, is it true? Now, it's not stated outright what she's asking, but implication being, is it true that my father is Bob? Right? Because she's already had a little piece of that puzzle, seeing Leland walk out of the house. And at that point, it's kind of like no turning back. She was like, okay, it's probably him.
I mean, is it true followed after Leland came in?
Yes.
So it could be that, and I think that is the strongest implication. Or could we possibly view it in the sense of, as he addresses her as princess, with her questioning everything around her with her purity, maybe she's even asking, like, is she worth even being watched over? Is she the princess, or is she starting to burn up?
And that would tie into later, near the end of the movie, the angel fades away from the painting. That was an evil laugh.
It was a sad laugh.
That was not sad. Imagine you're like talking to a friend and they tell you something that's tragic that happened and you go, like in response to them. That's horrible. You don't want to do that, Professor. And the disappearance of the angel reminds, of course, of the story of falling through space and, going faster and faster, start burning up and the angels aren't there anymore.
Yeah.
Well, you know what else is burning up?
Me.
This engine. Huh. I swear, is the engine on fire? It smells like something's burning. So Laura Palmer driving with her dad, having a typical daughter-father drive session.
Yeah.
And they get held up in traffic by this lady and gentleman of advanced age who are having real struggles trying to cross the street. If anyone I think is having a tough time other than Laura Palmer in this movie, it's probably those two. And while this is happening, this dude who be driving, and I think from what I've heard also, it's the actual actor's like real vehicle too.
Yeah.
He spins around, goes around the traffic jam, and emerges next to Leland. And again, Laura's saying something smells like it's burning. This, of course, brings to mind the idea of the scorch engine oil, right? That we often associate with Leland turning into Bob or Leland's Bob elements leaking out, however you want to think of it.
Yes.
Where there is scorched engine oil, there is fire, and it is certainly driving with them.
Yes.
Philip Gerard is kind of interesting, I think, in this movie, The One-Armed Man, because in the original series, he's portrayed, I think, much more clearly as a positive force in the sense that he's the one who stopped killing because he saw the face of God, he cut off his own arm, and he kind of helps the group find Bob and try to put him to justice.
Yeah.
We don't really see the One-Armed Man in, like, the last parts of Season 2. Nobody checks up on him anymore. We just kind of stop wondering about him.
You lose track of him.
So I kind of like that he's been brought back for the movie, although in this version, he definitely seems more, I don't know, morally gray is the term you'd use for these supernatural sorrow-feeding creatures. But his main concern isn't like, don't kill your daughter. His main concern is, you stole the corn. I had it canned over the store.
Yep, brings up the Formica table all over again. There is a matter in which you could almost argue there still is a warning in there, in which he does point with his pinky finger towards Laura's, like it was, or rather maybe at Leland, and just tells Laura it was him.
What was interesting in his phrasing, even before he gets to that, the look on her face when it was opened, there was a stillness, like the Formica tabletop. So what do you imagine then is the moment of the can being opened that you saw the look on her face having a stillness? Because Because I don't know. I'm not 100% which moment that is.
The contents of, well, if we consider like Garmonbosia? Garmon. Okay, Garmonbosia. If we consider like that being pain and sorrow, the point of opening to get to it would be somewhat of a big reveal. So if I had to guess, it's probably when revealed to Laura Palmer the true colors of Bob, like when the mask was revealed.
If that is the case, that's interesting then, because this is a moment where Leland/Bob is still trying to keep Laura unknown about that.
Yes.
Like in the rest of the drive following this, he tries to put on an act to hide this situation.
Yep.
So again, on some level, does Leland Bob at this point know that Laura knows? What does Bob think is referred to as the opening of the corn? Lots of questions.
Yep, I think that it very much is a message that kind of goes along the lines of just flat out accusing, as well as maybe just edging someone on, or maybe potentially warning Laura Palmer. It's really dependent on when you believe this is taking place, because we know that there's some, again, time nonsense between Mike being present inside of the Red Room.
Right.
And also how much we can rely on Mike being, truthful with what he said in the past. And lastly, the way that he behaves at the end of the film, in which he is chasing down Bob.
One of the crucial differences, I think, with this movie is that we have the man from another place being associated as the arm.
Yes.
We didn't really have that in the original show. In the series finale, we had a moment where the man from another place and the giant were sitting next to each other, and there's this idea of one and the same, either implying that the giant and the man from the place are the same, or that the giant was the same as the milkman, or something is one and the same. But now we're being linked pretty heavily to the idea that the one-armed man is not the one-armed man. Well, yeah, the one-armed man's arm, the other missing arm, is man from the place, based on him touching the kind of empty spot where the arm would be.
And speaking in unison.
So is the idea then that, Philip Gerard cut off that arm? How much is the arm still with him? How much are they on the same side, and how much are they independent agents?
Yeah.
Because they both want the Garmonbosia.
Or even against each other. They, at the end of the day, whatever the timeline is, they do want the Garmonbosia, but it seems that Mike is more sympathetic when he's chasing down Bob with his concerned face. It's when he's trying to rescue who he can and pull them out of the train car, but he also disappears by the end of it.
It reminds me of a situation where you have a fictional story where the vampires are trying to be redeemed, but they still drink human blood.
Yep.
So, the best you can do is they steal from a blood bank or something. That's what it reminds me of those, because even in the best possible scenario, Philip Gerard feeds on human sorrow. You can only be so good if you feed on human sorrow. Does he need to eat it to live? Or is it just a fun thing he likes to do?
Or is it something he has been thrown off of because the Red Room, Black Lodge, whatever you give it might be not very tangible in its own logic.
There's just a few moments in here where it seems like the arm, if not both the arm and the one-armed man, are very mischievous and not to be trusted. I get the sense from this movie that both spiritual forces are operating on their own system that isn't beholden to our sense of right and wrong. There's a sort of idea, reminds me a lot of the Greek Roman sort of gods, where they just kind of did what they wanted and humans were just caught in the middle. Sometimes they were nice to people. Sometimes they were mean to people. Sometimes they're Zeus and they just wanted to, fool around with the people as anything because it's Zeus.
Yeah, and sometimes Poseidon rules the underworld and sometimes Hades does. But regardless, I think that, in my personal opinion with this, we still see a fair amount of the proper Mike, in which we see him trying to truly work for this god, if you will. Meanwhile, I think that we see a little bit of inkling of the before with what happens, or just a reflection with what the arm's up to now, to just fully cement Garmonbosia, what the arm really wants or what they really want.
So do you take the idea then that the arm is the lingering Bob side of the one-armed man? He's the bad part that got cut off.
Yeah, he's the rather very Mike-like figure.
If you almost imagine a gangrenous limb, an infested limb.
Yeah, no, he's the Mike-like figure that still sets himself at Bob's side, someone who still works alongside him. So I think, yes, it's that small connection that sort of lingers. Meanwhile, I think that the most important part about this Mike connection, I would be more convinced if he wore the ring in the proper finger, but obviously it might just be a point in which he has bigger hands and they're using the same prop. But what I'm more so thinking of it is that he's wearing a ring on his pinky, but I can only imagine like someone wearing a ring on their pinky when they've outgrown a ring, when like one finger has grown too much, and this pinky finger, the smallest one, is the only one that can wear and present it. So him sort of shaking his pinky at him is a sense of like showing off the ring, but at the same time, like this is a different Mike than one tied to the ring in the lodge.
What do you mean by the Mike tied to the ring in the lodge?
Overall, I can imagine that the arm holding up the ring and just showing it off, like even physically in his hands, like piece by piece. He's not physically wearing it. He's still a part of the lodge. Meanwhile, Mike, who is no longer cut off his arm, face of God, yada yada, he's wearing off the ring. But again, pinky finger I think is important here.
I feel like
instead
there's a
of
lot
the marriage
of
finger.
I agree, that's a very good point. I feel like the idea of, even established by the arm earlier in the movie, the Ivy wed, putting the jade ring on the wedding finger seems to have a real significance.
Yes.
Based on what happens with Laura, and we'll get to that. So I kind of feel like, if anything, it's to dodge the effects of whatever doing that does. It marries you to something. And I don't think that in this situation he wants to get married to that something. So, and we also do not see Philip Gerard at all. We just see Mike. We see Philip Gerard acting in the human world, but possessed, but the host form.
This ring I thee wed to myself. Ba 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 ba.
Is this a reference to something?
The wedding song. Da da.
The wedding song.
Yeah, the wedding song.
Okay.
So yeah, no, wed him himself. He might want his own buddy back. They might want to be one whole body.
Oh.
No, I'm not being serious.
I'm just trying to
insightfully.
understand what you're talking about. We're good. We're good.
But yes, it's certainly a lot to sort of think on, and if there's anything we can agree with, it's definitely being separate from that sort of ring finger at the very least. And it is.
Well, I think it's shady enough that we don't really know the intentions of a lot of these lodge inhabitants. But the added confusion then that some of them are the discarded like limbs of others, it raises even more potential room for confusion. Where is the arm like literally an attachment to Mike in the sense that they are going to be mostly in agreement, or can the situation of stop hitting yourself, they don't agree?
Yeah, but at the same time, we got a person who happens to be an arm of another person, and yet you, Kalil, off pod, have made me aware that I can't compare the little Tremon boy to David Bowie's character because they have the same hair.
They do not have the same hair.
They do have the same hair. It's a bob.
They do not literally have the same
hair.
hair.
There are bobs inside the bob room, and you cannot deny that.
I don't deny that.
Exactly. Here's the thing. Double bob, kid bob, large bob, both have a monkey face.
You barraging me with all of these overwhelming, nonsensical ideas reminds me of how in the moment with Laura and Leland taking their drive, there's just this pure sense of sensory overload.
Hell God, baby damn no.
That I really like about this whole scene. That it fuses the idea of the tension that's going on with inside Leland and Laura in the seat. And Laura, again, is also smelling the scorched engine oil, dealing with the psychological ramifications of this whole encounter, plus all the constant, like, car engine revving and, like, honking and just screaming. I think it's a very effective sense of everything going over the top.
Like, whether it is in the car or outside the car, it seems that no one's having a fun time. There is absolutely a sense of mania happening from Laura, from Leland, from the car mechanic who just yells at them. It is just pretty wild. And there's just this point where just Leland is just completely lost in the moment when Laura asks him, like, who the hell was that? Leland's just sort of like, I don't think you know that. Do you know this person? And inside of this little point and moment as, like, everything's starting to die down, we get, like, in Leland, we're losing Leland. We're inching closer and closer to Bob returning. So this little spark that we had, whether or not it may have been intentional or not, from the presence of Mike, did that set Bob off? Did that set Bob off on at least activating Bob mode?
It makes you wonder, an hour from that point, would Leland remember any of this? Like, what would Leland's memory of this be? Because you got to imagine that Bob, if you want to imagine, took control of the wheel, metaphorically,
Bob,
quite
take the
early
wheel.
into that, right? Like, you have to imagine, as soon as the Philip Gerard showed up, Bob started to take over. And we've seen Bob take over very quickly. If we take even just the episode where Maddie's killed in the main series, in the time it takes Leland to straighten his tie, Bob's already in full command. So for how long that conversation goes out and how long they're stuck in traffic, I don't know. Are we slowly losing, like moment by moment, are we losing Leland in the conversation with Laura? Or by the time they pulled off to the side for the mechanic, was Bob already in full control at that time?
I think for myself, it is that little inching because, again, Ray Wise' impressive performance on just like that hopelessness, that sort of like confusion and just not knowing where he is, slowly becomes more determined and more fierce. And that's when he barks right back at the overall mechanics inside the vicinity.
See, I almost see it as someone who's desperately trying to cover up their act, so he's just shifting between different emotions.
Okay.
So I'm almost on the side of he's playing different roles and playing different performances in that situation.
Okay.
He'll be the concerned, sincere, like loving father about how it's really unfair that people could just do that in the world. But then he'll also be like, do you know him? Do you know him? And then he'll be like, oh, yeah, that's right. I actually was at the house, come to think of it. I feel like he's dancing between different ideas.
I think that I'd be more convinced with that if it wasn't for the fact that we got Teresa Banks flashbacks around here. I think if anything, Bob, like there's a specific point where these memories are coming back. I think Bob is just slowly trying to convince him what they're exactly doing, why they're there, if you will, and then slowly trying to egg out these bits of emotions in order to get him more access, more ability, more consciousness within this Bob Leland sharing host Leach thing that they got going on.
I know last podcast you were very interested in the idea of drugs not necessarily being just, illegal, like hard drugs, but also caffeine being a drug, nicotine being a drug.
Yes.
We have a little bit of that potentially where when Leland admits, yeah, I actually did go to the house, it was to get aspirin for a severe headache. Now, if we think about the idea of Leland having a severe headache at the same time that we were showing him to be Bob, if Leland is telling even a grain of truth, it could be the idea that taking an aspirin is a temporary relief from the effect of Bob in his conscious.
Yep, it's something that he should probably get looked at a little bit more if he has to take a home trip all the way back home in order to specifically get this aspirin bottle, like be laser focused on that he can't get by. It's something to just treat the mild symptoms of the day rather than the larger problem. And that's kind of how he handles things with other people. And that's kind of what we've seen him handle with himself.
I believe you're alluding to Sarah Palmer with the milk, right?
Like we mentioned before with Dale Cooper, who has milk before bed, something commonly associated with having a choice to sleep, and how I've stated that this seems to be a form of purity on its own because rest is needed for the body. The biggest part about this is that if the milk is drugged like we assume it to be, the fact that something that can be presumed as pure being tainted and not even being seen from the surface level, it is it's very fun for the character as well as just the use of, what would the phrase be, iconography of what this milk is supposed to mean and how it can be twisted into this horrifying
Almost like
thing.
symbology. This might be a kind of a strange question, but I genuinely don't know. I feel like milk would be a hard drink to drug because I don't associate milk with like, that strong flavor of milk.
Depends on the drug. The thing is that if it's mixed in just nice and finely and it's hidden, I mean, milk is a very opaque beverage.
Yeah.
If there's anything like if it
You
was...
can hide the color for sure.
Yep.
I'm just saying taste-wise, I don't know. Like, I feel like when I drink milk, I'm trying to make sure it's not spoiled.
Do you think that Sarah Palmer honestly has any active taste buds for how much like smoke she puts in her mouth? Everything must at this point taste like ash.
That's a fair point. Maybe for her, it is easier for her. And she might even be a little bit complicit in being aware that when she drinks milk, she gets knocked out.
Yeah, it's almost like even like Leland Palmer, like when she starts like relaxing and starts looking at the glass, that's when Leland sort of like perks it up and keeps moving it into her mouth.
She has to know on some level, right?
She has to, but that's probably why she smokes and tries to ignore it.
And not trying to victim blame here, but also just, again, understand her level of knowledge of what's going on.
It's something that we don't know how long this has been going on. We do not know how fully cognizant she even exists inside the space.
We do know she's trying to learn German, though.
We do know she's trying to learn German because that is the book that is resting on her. Now, I've done some book analysis before, but honestly, I might need your help, Kalil. Why would Sarah Palmer need to learn German?
The actor's name is Grace Zabriskie.
Yes.
I don't know how much German there's in the family.
Okay. So, with the lack of German representation in her family, she wishes to speak German.
Doppelganger's kind of Germanic, right?
Possibly. I'm not so good on words. Maybe she's just trying to learn German so she can flee the country and get away from her bad situation. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any deep reason. I mean, this feels like just a book that was probably just on the shelf.
It's a fun choice, to say the least. And for something in which I believe that was you who I was speaking to when it came to like considering David Lynch, since he had more strength inside the film, whether or not
more
like
control.
how much is intentional and how much is just something that's passive just to get seen by.
It is never really quite clear. This is one where I just wouldn't even know where to breach into it, where you would even go. Like, it would be very on the nose if she had a book like How to Speak Backwards, but I don't know what German would do for her because there's really not a lot that's German in here.
What to do when your husband is actively drugging you?
I mean, at this point, I feel like if I was Sarah Palmer, I'd want to read books about like spirituality and visions because I'd be straight up seeing like horses materialize in front of my bed.
Yep.
So I'd be more concerned about that than conversational German.
Yeah, it's fine. Like, we all have visions when we're growing up. It's all about like that puberty stuff and so on, right?
I mean, I think everyone experiences puberty differently, and some of us have more visions, some of us have less visions. Speaking of visions, it's also kind of strange, too, unless maybe, again, I'm just viewing it in an incorrect way. When she has the vision of the horse, she's, like, in her bed, right?
Yes.
But the horse is in the living room. So
it seems like it's that inside her bed. I suppose I wasn't checking too hard onto the rooms, but I'm pretty sure there was a lack of couch and chairs and everything, unless they have a second living room.
I for some reason wrote in my notes and had it convinced in my head that the dream vision she has is of the horse downstairs, not actually in the bedroom.
It seems that there's just a horse going all over their house, and they should probably get that checked. In fact, they should probably get checked on what exactly is going on in the household in general. You know, because that's like she's seeing a horse and that's all sort of going on in the background. We have Leland stepping onto the roof outside, walking around the corner, and walking through the window.
I mean, he might be silent, but the like electricity crackling is not.
Is not very subtle. I think that I was just bringing up comments just like, why doesn't he just go down the hall? He just has to loop around and he's right there. Less chance of getting caught. But I think, again, it's one of those like diary book moments where the use of Bob like outside the window is something that's strong enough that I can't imagine it not being a reference. Or I just don't know the intention of, say, for example, creeping through your window, other than making Bob look more creepy.
There's also the possibility that there's wiggle room as far as what's literally happening versus what's being perceived.
There's not much wiggle room through the window, I assure you. It's a very small window.
I'm just saying in the sense that Leland could have gone through the door, but Laura's perception is through the window. Because she's like half awake when this all starts. I mean, she's in her bed, and she starts moving even before Bob touches her at all. She's kind of like almost moving expectantly.
Yeah.
There's a sort of sexuality to the way her movements, her panting, and it's like she kind of knows it's coming on, which to me, it reminds me more of someone having like a sexual dream in their sleep. So Bob coming in through the window, it could literally be the case that Leland is outside climbing through the window.
Yeah.
Or it could be that her dream is filtering in what's really happening with what's kind of in her imagination in mind. There's like attempts at jump scares in this movie where like Bob's over creeping behind the bed or whatever. This is probably the most like jump scary moment is just the implication of Leland on top of Laura.
Yes, it
goes beyond implication, really.
It goes beyond implication to the point of everyone likely in the audience being very uncomfortable.
This is where they boo at the Con
This is where they boo.
I mean, at least if they did that, it'd be like a moral booing, which I'm more okay with. You're allowed to morally boo Leland there.
And in a way, Laura morally boos at Leland because the following day she is very absent, she is very frightened, she is very shaken. She's not having a great time. In fact, if you notice, Leland's having a full-on breakfast. Sarah Palmer is having a cup of coffee, again, that opposite end of what the milk would have actually done to her, but also that alone. And Laura Palmer has a very soggy cereal.
And I would boo that cereal.
There's a lot of things I would boo in this situation, but I believe that at this point, the silence is much more appropriate than a fair amount of sound. And boy, does Laura Palmer definitely hang on that uncomfortable silence. Again, great facial reactions. And as Leland is just going about his normal day and just like trying to like be that concerning father voice, that one that you're suspicious about a lot, and just checking in, is like, everything okay? What's going on? I also want to point out that after that evening, this horrible evening, there was initially at the table like salt running out, and then there was a full pepper shaker. At this point, the pepper shaker is at the table, and it seems like slightly the salt is also, but right behind it, right behind the camera shot, and you cannot see how much salt is there. It seems purposely blocked with the placement of them. So that might just show that we don't even know what's even left at this point. But overall, it seems that the pepper is over encumbered.
Well, and aside from the color associations of pepper being the black and the salt being the white, you could also look at it as an hourglass.
Yeah.
We don't know how much time is left. Laura's time is running out. The grains of salt being associated with the grains in an hourglass.
Leland needs to stop putting the salt in the pepper shaker, yes.
Yeah.
But no, like even when she's like trying to get away and then Leland is just like compelling and just like trying to like get something out of her, Laura is done. This is the point that has broken, and she says to stay away, in which that's when we get the Bob look. That is when we get the Bob time.
And when Laura leaves, we get more of that electric static, more imagery of electric kind of sounds and wires and everything.
Yep.
And it's like, once you realize how much electricity is in this movie, it's overwhelming, to be honest, when you're looking for it. Like, don't take a shot every time you see or hear electricity or blue light. It's too much. Because, yeah, even in this part, you could see there's more emphasis on that electric wiring and sounds, everything, which, if it is a sort of a stand-in for danger or ominous fate that is rapidly approaching, that would seem like an opportune time.
Yep. And so with Leland, honestly, he was just... Whether or not you end up believing that there is that presence of good, with how much Leland has poorly affected Laura's life and what has brought Bob in, at the end of the day, Leland is not really a good influence towards Laura Palmer, no matter how much he may or may not care. There is a little bit of caring light, possibly a positive influence to remind Laura about things, but out of either just mystical negligence or whether or not it was just as much the log lady felt like she could provide, we actually get a little bit instant with said log lady trying to give forward back to Laura Palmer.
So you think the log lady might have been negligent?
I think that seeing as the log lady is more aware of the situation than anyone else, or at the very least wants to help Laura Palmer in some way, to only be present in a single scene in which she tries to remind her on how fire can encumber. I mean, when someone is aware of something poor happening in someone's life and just kind of like giving forward passing words, can we not say that there's at least a little bit of responsibility dependent on how powerful they are in their actions? She comes forward, the log lady, when Laura Palmer is starting to waver, if you will.
She's on her way to the roadhouse.
She's off on her way to the roadhouse. And the log lady just randomly comes up, which I assume that she knows more than what she's getting on. Her log tells her more of what's going on. And she comes up to Laura Palmer and just warns her about the dangers of fire, if you will, the internal fire.
We don't see the log lady in the roadhouse, so unless she was just leaving, I would imagine the log lady wasn't actually going there for the roadhouse.
No, she's going there for the peanuts. She just took a whole bunch of peanuts, stuffed it in her pocket. And
entirely possible knowing her character, but I do also wonder if this is a place she even frequents that often.
Yeah.
If this is just something that she felt drawn to go just to see Laura in here.
Yeah. But the thing is that this is the only time she really sees Laura. If I could think of like a force that might be either in opposition towards the lodge or at least somewhat involved in these strange mystical things, and she again knows the things that might be going on with Laura Palmer even in light, to have just one instance where she sort of just gets herself involved, at the very least from what we see, it seems like that some could interpret that as a sense of negligence, unless she may have felt powerless to the situation, in which she just gave a passing word and walked away.
I think it's curious because nothing really in the Log Lady's character has portrayed her as someone who is negligent in a harmful way up to this point.
Yeah.
So if that is the intended characterization, there'd be quite a change, I think, in the character's interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think that she's on a passive role, but I almost wonder, I think her level of culpability here depends, at least partly, on how much the Log Lady really knows. All she really is able to communicate is the idea that innocence is burning, there's a wind rising, all goodness is in jeopardy. When a fire starts like this, it's hard to put out. Does the Log Lady know anything more than that? Because if the Log Lady just knows from her log or from a feeling of intuition that Laura's in a tough spot, what can she really do aside from just like talking to her, bringing it up, showing a little act of kindness? Because she brushes Laura's face, clasps her hand, and it's kind of like almost like a heart-to-heart moment. But I don't know what else the Log Lady's really capable of doing without any information. She doesn't probably know about Bob, I don't think.
It's always the question on how much she really knows, especially after her husband's death, how much the log knows, how much the
If
dog
those are,
can even
again,
tell.
if we consider those intros canon. Those intros, I don't think would have been made yet.
But even without the intro...
I'm just saying that might not have been, that might not be part of the lore yet when this movie was made.
Yeah, but without even the intro, look at the points in which she's speaking to people like Dale Cooper about her log and what that means to her.
Yeah.
And how the log does speak. That's still a canon point.
Correct.
So I don't know if all the intros at the beginning were completely canon. It would strengthen the point, but...
Even if they are canon, they came out later, is what I guess I'm thinking is that we don't know if Lynch had those already in mind or not.
She has quite the eloquent way to try to explain things to this person that she may know a lot or a little. So it still edges in my mind whether or not how aware she was and how she's so passive in her role instead of being more involved. It's obviously that this can be a very quick fallacy to fall into.
Well, that's the tough part, too, is because if, let's say she tried to act on these feelings more, she doesn't have anything to do that would report to the law. And she also, if she has any sense about what kind of dangers Laura's in, she wouldn't want to go to Laura's parents.
She needs to take a page out of Wyndham Earle's book, take her log, and whap it over Jock Renault's head. Then it throws away some problems already.
I mean, that would help somewhat, but I don't...
Takes to Leland.
I mean, if anything, again, Jacques Renault's a little bit more of a complicated character because while he is complicit in what happens that night over at the Pink Room dance floor area, he's also the one that helps carry Donna out and does play a role of assistance at points.
Which is true. Maybe she should just go after Leland then. Hey, honestly, between the three-lettered characters inside of this show, who would win, Bob or Log?
Carl Rod. He's trying to go to the three-lettered character.
I want to call.
It's the best I could do. I feel like there's a really obvious one that I'm... Leo. Leo's three-letter.
Leo is also
Leo would
three-letter.
probably actually win that fight. Leo seems pretty sketchy and dangerous.
That's until he kind of gets declawed and is meant to only really bare his teeth when he has to have tarantulas involved. So the power scale's all over the place here.
I think the entity most able to move Laura's heart, maybe not physically beat up people, but move the heart is Julie Cruz, the Roadhouse singer, basking Laura in red and blue lights.
Yeah.
I don't have much really to say about this inclusion. I do like it. This singer was included in a couple episodes of the original, including when Maddie's killed as well as in the pilot. And she'll appear again in something else that I won't spoil. But she's someone who I think is fitting to be there. I think the use of the red and blue light, hinting at a mix of feelings.
Yes.
Hinting at a mix of whatever you interpret those lights to be. It's that state of both highs and lows, dangers and calming, and it being immediately following up the Log Lady.
Mm-hmm.
This mix of emotions happening between 2 points of heightened emotion. It's taking place after the Log Lady's very reassuring, comforting words, but then before the situation with Buck, which goes much more on the side of, do you want to sleep with the homecoming queen?
Yes.
So the sort of in between of these two heightened emotional states is where this song happens. And then lyrically, World of Blue. I'm just going to say the title. I mean, it is what it is. You mentioned at one point someone says the phrase out of the blue. So like, again, how much do you read into that literally?
Yeah.
And lyrically, it's just a lot of uncertainty in the song.
Yeah, it's a point of questioning, especially when Log Lady throws the log in the path. I could almost say that with scenes like this, you could almost say if the Log Lady was more involved, or if she was a more of an active force, that would put less agency on Laura Palmer. And I think the biggest thing on this is that mostly Laura can only get Laura out of the spiritual issues that unfortunately she has been thrown into for the world. So
I think it's a failure most of a community.
Yeah.
More than any
World of Blue.
individual.
World of Blue.
Well, I mean, in all seriousness, we talk about blame and we want to avoid blaming the victim, and we talk about blame. We don't know how much Leland's complicit. I think at the end of the day, everyone has some murky involvement in this.
Yes.
And again, I got to back up Bobby Briggs. While it was a definitely very reckless and over-the-top execution of this idea, yelling at everyone saying, you can't just like cry now and pray and all this stuff. When Laura was alive, she was crying out, nobody did anything. And calling himself out in that, I think he's the closest to the truth we're going to get, that this was a community. This was a failing of the community, that we don't detect these things.
Yeah.
That we don't help people. Because again, going back to the real world, there's a lot of people out there may not have supernatural experiences, but there's a lot of young people who are going through very, very rough upbringings. And you think about someone like Teresa Banks, who just gets forgotten about, and we just don't talk about the freak accidents. We don't talk about the stragglers and those who end up dying because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it's easier to blame, oh, this is a freak accident, oh, this was something singular to blame, rather than look at it as a failing of how our families are structured, how our education is structured, how our governments are structured, how our law enforcement is structured. So many red flags that Laura put out there for her friends and her family and for the community that no one did anything with.
Nope.
So if it's indictment of anything, I think Fire Walk With Me and a lot of Twin Peaks is an indictment of that sort of illusion that it can't happen here. And that's where it's interesting to see so much of the original series play out with Cooper and Harry Truman going, Twin Peaks is a special place. There's a pocket of goodness here. And it's like, there is? Excuse me, there's a pocket of goodness and happiness here. The Bookhouse Boys are protecting it. Then you watch Fire Walk With Me and you're like, who are you protecting? What do the Bookhouse Boys think they're doing? What does Cooper think is so good here? When there's actually a lot of pain.
Yeah.
It's an illusion.
It's an illusion. People oftentimes put illusions in front of their faces in order to try and work things out. And honestly, some people will just assume that all you need is a good attitude, and that's the key.
I was just going to go for that. You stole my segue. No, it's true. It's true. The first thing you're going to do is learn to have a good attitude. That's the key. Anybody will tell you that.
You're not fooling around, it seems.
I just like the Leo scene.
Yeah,
I don't
do.
got any deep dive analysis on this. It's dark humor. It's the sense of how over the top and absurd his delivery is of these lines.
Over absurd on his delivery, but also his just general mental state. Like, clearly Shelley has to get going. They can probably talk about this matter later, try to work things out. But no, instead, Leo's desires act precedent. That is what matters at the forefront.
It's like you can't get any more overtly toxic and just like belligerently domineering and controlling than Leo.
Yeah.
Where Leo's so convinced that his business with the truck stuff that he does, the trucking, his legal business, or his illegal cocaine business is enough for the household that Shelley don't have to go to work. Even though we're led to believe like Shelley going to work actually still matters for the household, and still she does a lot for the place and for their home, I guess you would say.
Yeah, but obviously Leo has to be right.
This specific tile has to be clean.
This specific tile has to be clean.
When you don't think of Leo, the first thing you think of Leo is cleanliness, right?
The first thing I think about Leo's house is that it's incomplete and other things need to be finished.
It is really funny when you think that, too, is that some of these shots of the house show that it's not in a great state of repair. So why does cleaning the tile in this one room matter so much?
Because Leo has to be right.
Leo has to be right. I got nothing more to say on that. Fun exchange. By fun, I mean bad. Actually bad, but...
Yeah. There's no other actually bad things in this movie at all.
I mean,
though,
if
so
anyone is to
thankfully.
be pitied, it's Heidi. She's bleeding profusely from the nose.
Too much. Like,
Way too much blood.
Heidi needs possibly a hospital because that thing used to be a napkin, but now it is just a red flag.
Because
It is a physical red flag, Kalil.
Yeah, I get nosebleeds. I understand the pain and frustration of them. But yeah, that's a lot.
And she's just sitting out onto the booth. They haven't really brought her back in order to just let her rest.
At least have her bleed in the back. You know, no one customers will see that.
Okay, as far as it goes, like blood out in the open, that's a potential biohazard. There's
Yeah.
blood cleanup kits about that. I don't know if
If
the double
Hank
RCs
Jennings
have
were
their-
in the diner, he wouldn't have stood for this.
If Norma's mother were in here,
Oh.
that review
Vivian.
would shut them down.
Oh, man. Vivian. Everyone's favorite Twin Peaks character.
Everyone's favorite Twin Peaks character, and that's why I said her name.
Yes. What do you make? Do you think there's any significance of Heidi? Because she doesn't need to be in the movie, right? Mm-hmm. She's just there to exist with a nose bleeding in the open.
She existed 2 other times in the series, and that was both times.
Beginning
and
and
when
the
she
end.
is late for work, and she is giggling because she was having a fun time with
Seconds
her
on
partner.
Knockwurst.
Yep. So, having someone so giggly and happy and just kind of like being
Communicates the tone shift of the movie versus the show.
bingo.
Also, I'm kind of thinking if you want to really take it afar, it's the open bleeding wound in public sight that no one is tending to.
Yep.
Laura's literally bleeding out there and no one's doing anything.
Like, it's not really even doing much for her. It's not like Lenora says, I'm going to tend to this, you're going to have to do this. No, it's just like, no, Heidi can't go out and do this anymore. Please, could you help out with the much larger problem of feeding the elderly? Now, feeding the elderly, very important.
Yes.
Make sure that people such as the Treymans, as well as Harold Smith, I know he's not elderly, but someone has to get
the
him food.
homebound. The homebound.
Yes, the homebound. But at the same time, yeah, you should probably like figure out something for Heidi.
And if we look at Heidi as Laura, we also have the idea that the best Heidi can do is plug up the bleeding. She can't stop the problem. She can just like shove things in there to slow it down.
I hope she can stop the problem. I hope she just doesn't continue to bleed for
well,
all
Fire Walk
eternity.
With Me is mostly a prequel, right?
Remember,
so
like, through
Heidi's
Twin Peaks?
alive after this.
Heidi is alive. She's not covered in blood when we see her the next few times, which would honestly change a bit of the mood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Seconds on Knockwurst to take other meanings if she comes to work with blood.
You know, some people had questions right after Twin Peaks, and one of them was, does Heidi bleed? We don't know where it came from. We don't know why it came from there, but we had to answer the fans' questions.
We have to answer the questions. So Shelley is voluntold to assist then with Meals on Wheels. And the way they do this is they take the car and they just start putting in the trays of food without anything really to hold things still.
Yeah, you know, you don't need to secure the cups down when you're driving. You're going at a speed of 1 mile per hour, so everything shouldn't shift.
I would get
move
nervous
around.
even 1 mile an hour with like drinks that could spill over. With how much there's going to have to be stacked too. Like,
Yeah.
oh, that
Like
seems reckless.
Look, they can't afford drink carriers at the double R, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be very, very careful, or at the very least, there's just no drinks that survive on the way. Thankfully, the trays cover everything else, so...
Speaking of tray, the Treymons, or should I say Chalfonts, or should I say what their names are, they are also in the parking lot here of the double R. And... but it's not really quite clear if Laura's seeing them only or if Shelley could even see them at all. We know that when Shelley is out there, they're walking away and Laura's watching them walk away. I don't know if Shelley can see them too. Mm-hmm. But they certainly directly talked to Laura and approached with the grandson wearing the white needle nose mask with the stick thing. Also a stick protruding from the mask. I forgot about that detail last time.
Yep.
And they decide, you know, this portrait, this painting would look really nice on your wall. If you were either working at a job or doing like volunteer work in a community, and someone just approached you in a parking lot and handed you a painting, and they said this would look really nice on your wall, how would you respond if it was that painting?
I would burn it.
You burn it?
I would burn it.
That's an extreme No, you wouldn't.
It's an extreme
Stop
response.
memeing. What would you do?
But this is an extreme situation that's going on. As soon as someone in a white mask with a little stick on the head says that someone's watching me are just rummaging through my things, while also they're like, here, have this lovely painting. It'll look great on your wall, which I hope they haven't seen my wall before. I'd burn it. Maybe burn my hands in the process. Try to get as much of them off me as possible.
What do you mean by them rummaging off your stuff? You said they were rummaging through your stuff?
Yeah, because how do they know what my wall looks like? How do they know
could
it
just
look
be
great?
saying, like, theoretically it would look good on your wall. They don't know.
And theoretically, someone could be sneaking into your home, going through your diary. All these theoretical things.
Do you write about what your wall looks like in your diary? How would the diary
Apparently, I don't know. How are they knowing these things?
Well, I mean, probably because they're supernatural entities.
Exactly! Burn!
No, I wouldn't want to upset them. I'd take that painting and I'd put it on my wall.
I would run away from my wall. I'm not near my wall, but I'll run in the opposite direction.
No.
I'm not going to come home one day, Kalil, and just assume someone gave me a painting and said someone was in our house.
And we get more blue static overlaying also when this happens. So if this is in real life, imagine you're getting the painting and blue static is all around you for just little seconds, little bursts.
I can't overstate this enough. Burn. Burn, burn, burn. Fire burn for me.
The grandson also whispers, "The man behind the mask is looking for the book with the pages torn out. He is going toward the hiding place. He is under the fan now." That's one of the more literal, like, things I can imagine one of these spirits to actually say. That's pretty direct and doesn't really need a lot of expanding.
Nope.
Although I do want to highlight that the fan is important, not the stairs. This goes back to the pilot, back when I asked you if you were more of a stairs man or a fan man, and you said you're a stairs man.
I'm more of a fan of the stairs because here's the thing.
I'm more stairs of the fan.
Anyone could be on stairs as much as anyone could be preparing a great abundance of food, okay? But to have something such as going under a fan, that's less likely. And I'll tell you it's less likely because, Kalil, do you see any fans around us in this household?
Yeah.
Do you see some actual fans that you can, does the spinny bits?
Yeah, fans always spin.
Fans always spin above your head?
Not always.
He's under the fan. Under the fan. Are you sitting under the fan?
No.
Is there stairs over there? Yes.
What is your point?
Stairs. Stairs.
I
is
don't
my point.
understand your point.
Stairs are the more better identifier.
Common does not mean better.
It does.
That
Because
means the fan
it's more
is
frequent.
rarer.
What? It's rarer, but who needs rarity when you've got things that have better utility?
But the fan blades make the whoosh, whoosh, whoosh sound.
Yeah, I'm sure that I can make the stairs go whoosh, whoosh, whoosh if I tried really hard.
What would that even look like? Or what does that mean?
Don't try me. We won't want to find out.
So I'm about as confused right now as Shelley Johnson was when Laura decided, I can't do Meals on Wheels today, hands her the tray and runs off. Mm-hmm. In that I feel like Shelley had to have been extremely frustrated that not only did she get shoved this job because Heidi's bleeding out in a booth right now, but that now the person she's supposed to do this with, who's the one, I guess, mainly in charge of Meals on Wheels, its original creator, Laura Palmer, is now just ditching just because, with no explanation.
Yeah, I don't even know whose car that is. Like, honestly, I imagine it was Laura Palmer driving in a car that she
Company
owned.
vehicle?
Company vehicle, I guess. It's called the Jenningsmobile, if you will. I don't imagine it belongs to Shelley per se. Maybe it is.
The double R stands for Vroom Vroom, but the R's are capitalized. Anyway, later, Laura doesn't burn her hands and puts up the painting on the wall. And she goes to bed at night. She closes her eyes.
Yeah.
And what proceeds then we can interpret to be a dream because she goes to bed with her eyes closed. She has a bunch of weird happenings.
That's how usually you go to bed,
and then
Kalil.
that she sees herself sleeping and she wakes up later. So caged within this sort of dream scenario is a first-person perspective from Laura going through the door in the painting, which then leads to a doorway with red curtains. But to the left of that door with red curtains is the grandmother, Chalfont, Tremont, whatever you want to call her, pointing Laura onward toward a different room away from the curtains. And that is where the grandson, or as I have in my note, the Grandon, is standing in the darkness.
Yeah, in which she's...
And he does a little snap.
Yeah, he does a little snap.
Fire illuminates the room. He's a true magician.
And then curtains appear. So no matter what path she ends up trying to take, no matter where she's pointed, you'll end up running around in circles like a little dog and end up in the same spot as she finds the curtains, which leads her to a special room.
Whether she's in the room or not, I think is a little unclear. We don't see her physically enter this room with the curtains. We see the screen fade over to the red curtains and the chevron floor, pan up to a Formica table, but Laura's not there physically seen. We do maintain what could be a first-person perspective, though, so
Yes.
debatable. In that room, Cooper is with the arm. The arm asks, "Do you know who I am?" Cooper shakes his head. We get the confirmation that he is the arm, and he sounds like that whooping noise, which we hear occasionally associated with electricity, whether it's the pole over at the Deer Meadow trailer park, or we will hear that occasionally associated very, very quietly when Leland is remembering the TV static at Teresa Banks's place, which is also, again, in that area. The arm then picks up the jade ring, which has that upside-down owl cave symbol on it. Or I guess if you flip the ring over, it'd be upside right. Depends on which way you're holding it.
Either way, it looks like a happy owl. Like a big
Owl
old
cave,
open
owl
beak,
cave image.
2 peaks.
And Cooper says at the camera, or at Laura if she's physically there, "Don't take the ring, Lara.
Lara.
Don't take the
Don't
ring."
take the ring, Lara Croft.
And we'll put a pin in that for right now.
Put a
pin in Laura. Put a pin in the ring.
Put a pin on Lara, too.
Put a
ring on Lara Croft so that we can get Laura away from this situation. Lara Croft can handle this.
Laura wakes up in bed, and she's clutching her left wrist, which it could be a sign that her arm went numb or her hand went numb.
It
could be.
Which is important because the hand that stops her ring hand is the same hand that was touched and felt by the log lady, almost as if like one is more pure than the other. One is trying to stop this from happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of subtext here with arms fighting each other. Then we have Annie appearing in the bed beside Laura. Annie's got blood all over the mouth, kind of over the face. She looks like what happened to Heidi probably after. And Annie says, "My name is Annie. I've been with Dale and Laura. The good Dale is in the lodge and he can't leave. Write it in your diary." So I feel like this is one of the most potent moments in Fire Walk With Me that leaves more questions than it answers.
What do you mean?
Because a lot of fans are going to go into this movie like, how's Annie? And like, does this answer that to you?
I mean,
it implies, like, if we believe in what this is, right? If this is actually Annie and not a trick, which her eyes look like normal human Annie. They don't look like a doppelganger or something. She says that, I've been with Dale and Laura. So she says, I've been with Laura to Laura, or else she's not even talking to Laura. She doesn't even realize who she's talking to.
Maybe it's a situation where Bob Coop is asking, where's Annie? But that's because in between time itself, we have Annie going around Carmen Sandiego style.
The good Dale is in the lodge. That opens a lot of questions. Because if we take the finale of the original show, we just see A. Cooper leave. And that was one question I remember bringing up to you at the finale is like, is there a good and a bad, or is it like a synthesis? Like, what is this? This line would imply that, no, there's two. The good one's stuck and the bad one's out.
Or is she speaking ye olde like, and it's like, the good Dale. The good Dale, the kind Dale.
Is that what you think?
Guest of Dale. Like,
I don't think it's in Annie's character.
I'm actually teetering on whether or not, like, it is that. Because it is...
It's not in the inflection. She doesn't say it like that.
She doesn't have inflection. She never did.
The good Dale is in the... I take it to mean what it sounds like.
She's been very straightforward with her deliveries thus far, so I'm not fully convinced.
Okay.
I think that's still strong that there is a good and bad Dale. But...
And that's also the question then is it so simple in black and white as Doppelganger Cooper is the bad one, the one that went in is the good one? And like, obviously Dale Cooper isn't a perfect person, but throughout most of the series, he does seem pretty good.
I mean, how would you react to saying, like, the bad Dale is in the lodge?
That would leave a lot of questions if this is the good one we're left with. Smashing his head in the mirror with Bob in the reflection.
I think my favorite part about this is that there's so many scenes inside of this movie I think can be self-contained, be part of itself, and be part of a overall experience anyone can leap into and have a good time with. This is one of the scenes in which it would just leave so many more questions. Who? What?
If you watch this and then watch Pilot, that leaves, again, so much to make you wonder. You won't even see Annie for so many episodes.
Yeah,
this is going to be completely losing you.
Yeah, it's going to take probably over like a day's worth of content in order to go through it. If you take no bathroom breaks, bathe, or eat.
Don't even brush your teeth.
No, there's no time for this. You, like, just pour down your drain and just like smash it into the overall mirror. It'll wake you up enough for the rest of the viewing.
Then there's also the situation with write it in your diary, which did Laura write it in her diary? We never see her do that, and we never see a page where she wrote that in her diary manifest at any point.
It's almost as if, Kalil, it's a missing piece. It might be a missing piece here.
So, do you think Laura wrote that in her diary?
If you want me to be completely honest, if there's one thing that I can expect, and I could be very wrong, but if there's one thing I can expect in the missing pieces, she probably did.
Okay. So your expectation would be missing pieces, we're going to see her write that in the diary.
Yes.
And then what happens to that page then? Because it's not in any of the diaries then that Truman or Cooper got their hands on.
No, not in this timeline. Time, again, is a construct that makes no logical sense at various points.
Okay.
So if I were to say that this would alter things a bit, or at the very least give Cooper a leg up in the future past, there's a possibility.
I think this moment is so critical for Fire Walk With Me, but in a lot of strange ways.
Yeah.
Because, like, we had Harold show up earlier, and that was a season 2 character.
Yes.
But Annie is an interesting one because Annie is a late season 2 character.
Late season 2 character.
That Lynch inherited, basically. Lynch probably didn't want fully Annie, but he did have to address the fact that Annie's a thing. And he ended the show with this overwhelming question hanging over, how's Annie? He then has Annie show up in this movie for a total of like 2 minutes, say something super cryptic, and then butterfly her way off.
Specifically from a situation that was in the last episode. If there's one thing that I'm very interested in seeing how Lynch would handle, it's the idea of time travel through Twin Peaks.
Yeah. It's just a situation where this could have not been in the movie. This is something that feels very much at odds with everything else. That it's like, was this a mistake? Because it puts himself in a situation where, one, people who are coming into this without any context are going to be more lost. And if they watch this before the show, they're going to be even more out of timeline sync. But then also it kind of calls into question the idea of, was there supposed to be more Twin Peaks after Fire Walk With Me? Because the series decided to then sit for like 25 years or 20 something years. So it's like, I've heard some people say that there was going to be another movie if this would have done well. I don't know if that's ever been like outright confirmed by Lynch or Engels or anyone else, but like it feels like setup, right? Like the good Dale and the bad Dale, or, you know, like, where's that going? Because it doesn't go anywhere in this movie.
I think that it's one of those interesting sort of hanging threads that is just very tempting for the mind, that I thoroughly enjoy this in the film. And I almost enjoy the fact that there's a lack of resolution.
I think this is the number one piece of evidence I would bring up if someone brought up the idea that Fire Walk With Me was meant to be the ending of Twin Peaks. Like, if Lynch decided, made the show, it got taken off, I'm putting all my energy into this final Twin Peaks project, Fire Walk With Me, it ends with the beginning of the story. It ends with Laura. It was always about Laura. It's the end. Then why would you do this? Because he opened up a can of worms over the convenience store, and you should have seen my
can
face.
of cream corn. Thank you very much.
But it raises more questions than it answers, and it invites the idea that this was going to go somewhere.
Or he just wanted you to suffer, specifically you, Kalil.
And who's to say it doesn't go somewhere in The Return or in one of the books? But that's over 2 decades later. That feels like that's not what was in his mind originally.
Yeah.
We can speculate about the Jeffries and Judy's thing, but at least that one, it was like so much of just an implication that if we never got resolution on it, it's fine.
Yeah.
This was opening up a major character scenario. Yeah. Anyway, speaking of things that this movie doesn't go into, okay? So there's several characters that are not in this film that are obviously more staples of Twin Peaks or would be relevant to have in a Laura Palmer movie.
Yes.
So I want to talk about a few of those with you very quickly.
Very well.
First up would be Ben. Ben was the only one I was able to find more information on why he might not have appeared in the film.
Okay.
So according to the trivia that's on IMDb, Richard Beymer, the actor who plays Ben Horn, declined to participate in the movie when he was asked to do a scene where Ben would be forcing Laura to kiss him in exchange for a bag of cocaine.
Yeah.
Beymer felt that there hadn't been build-up for Ben to extort Laura like that, so the scene came off as exploitative to him. So if we assume that story's true, which I'm going to do right now, with the full asterisk that this is my source's IMDb trivia, I do not know if it's substantiated elsewhere.
Okay.
But if this is true, I think it's interesting because I think it would show that Lynch did not want to recast Benjamin Horne, which I don't know. Is that easier or harder than recasting Donna? I don't really know. But he chose not to recast if that's the case. And it was enough of an important scene that he didn't just like change it or write it out.
Yeah.
Like if he was going to bring in Ben, it was for this scene. So I just kind of want to bat around the idea of if this scene had happened, what we would have thought of this. Like, let's assume it would happen this way, that Ben would have a bag of cocaine, forcing Laura to kiss him in exchange for it.
Yeah.
Does that feel in line with Ben's character in the show? / do you think it would fit his potential character for the movie? Like, would it have been a good idea?
I don't think that this is too much in the Ben alley. Then again, we didn't see much of Ben and Laura in the past. Benjamin Horne, though he is someone who makes people do things, it's usually in a way that either A, if you are hired by Ben or handled by Ben, he'll say, jump, and you will jump. Meanwhile, if it's anything else where he's just sort of lingering around and just like working with people, I feel like his personality comes off that he'll convince you to do the thing because he'll make it sound more so of the right thing to do, despite how the morals may collide in different ways. Say, for example, the buddy-buddiness he had with Cooper, despite Cooper's suspicions.
This just feels a very, like, a dirty, low move.
It seems more aggressive, which seems more in line with, well, other cocaine providers.
I don't know if Ben would stoop to this low. Like, we know that Ben slept with Laura.
We know
by his own admission.
Yeah.
Under the pretense of One-Eyed Jacks.
Yeah.
But the idea of extorting a kiss using cocaine feels very hands-on.
Not to mention,
for someone who normally doesn't dirty his hands.
Not to mention, like, cocaine seemed to be more of a connection point. Sure, he had connections with Leo somewhat, but that seemed to be mainly for muscle.
Yeah.
It seemed like either A, the connections were primarily things like monetary needs, or the connections were B, with some sort of heroin provider, and that was mainly the Blackie fix to kind of hold and lord power over her. So, yeah, I think that weirdly enough, there'd be too much cocaine at that point.
Yeah. I'm ultimately in agreement with you. I'm in agreement that if that was the scene, if that was the only way to get Ben in the movie, I think it was right not to do that.
Yeah.
Again, assuming that was the situation. I also don't think, watching this movie, that it needed Ben. I think you could have scenes with Ben and Leland or Ben and Laura. And there could have been potentially really good scenes between Ben and Laura, but I never found myself really concerned for the lack of it.
Yeah.
Other characters of note that we know are part of Laura's story would be Dr. Jacoby, Johnny, and Josie. Are there any of those three that you could imagine a good scene in this movie with?
Nope.
Like,
because honestly, there's not many good scenes that are going on. And if we had any
a
implications...
well-made scene, an interesting scene, or something like good to have in the movie.
Plenty that I'm sure would make me a little bit uncomfortable, but if there's anything implied by the diary, there's just instances with the overall training with Josie that seems to be very much openly upfront, but more so as a excuse for Josie to either get by or maybe get something else.
If I could pose it this way and put you in a tough spot, if you could pick one of these to have a like missing piece, let's say, or have been in the film, would you want a scene from Fire Walk with Me of Dr. Jacoby with Laura, Johnny with Laura, or Josie with Laura?
As far as that goes, Jacoby's the only one that makes sense. Johnny Horne and Josie. As far as Johnny and Josie goes for the themes of the film, they would have added too much, I think. Like, Johnny would be something in which Laura's more power dynamic would probably come through.
Similar to Harold?
If anything, similar to Harold, but I would say that it would... I don't know how much of the desperation angle might go through. As far as Josie goes, I mean, she'd probably be less than present, and there would only just be a little bit of fan service here and there brought. But maybe it might just put a poor light on Josie. Maybe she'll just be there. Jacoby, meanwhile, goes well with the themes of the film, in which it seems like Laura trying to reach out but finding points of helplessness. Having someone as a potential reliable figure because of his job and position, but also how she and her perspective might have to twist that and what these recordings might even mean, or how she's influenced to even make these very passive recordings. I think would really tie into sort of the dead end Laura is cut at. I think that he's the only one amongst this group that makes the most sense.
I also think it'd be kind of interesting with Jacoby is that one advantage of writing a character like him is that it invites situations for Laura to talk about her feelings and desires and thoughts in a way that would feel more natural than just like saying it to like a random friend or family member. Like, he's inviting her to reveal her deepest, darkest thoughts and feelings. It's a nice excuse for the writer of the movie, or writers in this case, to have very direct dialogue.
Yeah.
To like very clearly lay things on the table that otherwise would have felt out of nowhere with other characters. You know, she wouldn't just turn to Donna and say things like that, but she could turn to Jacoby and say certain things.
Yeah.
Johnny interests me in the sense of what could you do with it? Either a scene that'll give her hope, like the log lady scene, or like you said, a scene more like Harold with a sort of dangerous element. But I feel like since we got both of those already, I don't know what it would give that'd be different or new.
Yes.
So I don't know. Johnny, I potentially, but I don't know enough about that one.
Yeah, I'm not too confident in myself with that one.
I think we both agree though. What we really wanted was just more long scenes with Waldo the bird. I think Waldo the bird is an underdeveloped character in Twin Peaks. I want a full character arc with him.
How well do you think he tastes on top of donuts? Isn't that where he's
I'm
splattered?
vegetarian, okay? Now, granted, is eating the blood of a bird...
No, I'll put you into a tough spot here
Okay,
on this
okay.
podcast. No. Rest in peace.
I feel like blood
Waldo's
would not be
character.
very good donut topping.
Blood
It would
wouldn't
be very, like, irony, kind of like a metallic-y tasting.
How do you know how blood tastes like?
I'm saying, I know how
of a
blood
bird.
tastes when my nose is bleeding Heidi style. I don't know if bird blood tastes exactly the same.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable not knowing.
Very well.
What kinds of blood have you ingested over the course of your life, Professor?
I mean, so Waldo. Waldo the bird is in a cage while all sorts of nasty stuff is going on after Laura Palmer was whisked away on a chariot because of certain plans Jock was offering to both Laura and Ronette on this day. It's very lucky she ran across them at this exact junction, if you will.
One of the nasty stuff happening around. The worst part about it, I would say, is hearing Laura clearly crying out, "Don't tie me up tonight," and Jacques continuing to tie her up anyway.
Yeah.
And again, that side of Jacques, oftentimes we see him being a very like caring individual despite his disposition.
It seems caring. Inside of the books, it seems that both Leo and Jock are a little bit more supportive. But
in this particular situation, he clearly ignores any semblance of consent.
yes.
Now, obviously, she's a high school student. That consent issue aside,
Yes.
she clearly states she isn't comfortable with this, and he pushes it anyway. Even Ronette's trying to stop it, too. Ronette being portrayed as someone who's in the same situation as Laura, but on Laura's side very much. And this is where we get Leland appearing in the window. And at that moment, it zooms in on the fireplace. We see the dark trees at the night. And Jacques exits the cabin, probably to use the bathroom, is my guessing. He kind of just saunters off.
I mean, it seems like he had
In a
some attention towards Leland and what was going on and just some of the reactions. So I'm imagining he's just checking things out, but also not in the best mindset because of the drugs.
Yeah, I don't think he has any conscious memory of seeing anyone. Because then Leland knocks him out basically as soon as he leaves the cabin.
He leaves the cabin and looks around, but yeah, no, Leland is crouched over Assassin's Creed style and then just bashes him, kicks him a few times.
And notably doesn't kill him. Because it seems like when Bob takes over, he's not very good at like following through on consistent kills.
I mean,
Later he obviously addresses that in the show.
well, if you can believe that it's Bob who kills him.
I would say it is.
I would say that the thing is that Bob doesn't kill things that he doesn't need to. Oftentimes, his murders have been things in which he's been able to taint and work against. We see that it happens with leaving Ronette behind, which is just a loose end. Like, why not kill Ronette at the same time?
Yeah.
It seems that there's a certain pact that Bob goes by. I mean, Jock could be a potential threat inside the future, especially seeing him around and everything like that. So that wasn't an issue inside the series. So I'm imagining just bits and pieces of memory leak into Leland's mind and something kind of sort of gets unlocked. His side of Bob, how much Bob has influenced him, comes out. And then he is more willing to do a Bob-like action. So that's where I'm getting at because, again, it looks like twice this man has been owned by at least the body of Leland.
We also, I don't think it's ever been implied in the show, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we knew prior to the movie that Philip Gerard / Mike was there, right? Like, was that ever established in the show that he was, like, around that night, like, in the area and at the scene?
Which scene?
The train car scene. where Laura ends up being killed.
Nothing really implied, no.
Until now.
Until now, in which it seems that it was inside of a deep chase after Leland had captured the girls.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems that right behind, Mike is trying to catch up and chase them down. And it doesn't seem in that same malicious sense that we see him in a scene afterwards in which, like, he's getting what he wants. It seems that more so he is a passive participant in trying to do something about the events, almost maybe even against Bob.
Side note, I don't know if this is like a plot hole, but I think it's really interesting. In the original show, I'm just kind of remembering now that when they were trying to find Bob, they had Mike / Philip Gerard sitting in the Great Northern, like basically scanning people to find out if they're Bob.
Mm-hmm.
But then in Fire Walk With Me, he knows that Leland is Bob because that's who he yells at in the car. Yeah. And he also would have seen him this night. So why is it that Philip Gerard doesn't just immediately know who Bob is?
Because Bob is an entity that finds Leland as a host. We know from what Bob is trying to do with Laura Palmer, and we know what's happening with Leland. There's some sort of at least hosting mechanism. So if either he, A, leapt from this host, or B, can take on multiple hosts, it'd be important for him to use this method.
But you still would want to go check the person who was last in. Like, I feel like the logical thing Philip Gerard would want to do is say, maybe he doesn't know who the man is, but it'd be a situation where he would know him right away if he saw him. He could describe him.
He'd know him right away, perhaps, but again, with Leland Palmer, for one, I think that, again, that host thing can be questionable, but two, they do go to the Great Northern Hotel, a place where Leland had worked, so if there's any connections with other people socially, it'd be most likely in that place.
It just feels a little bit like a bit of a story contrivance that he's able to know just enough to lead them to the area, but not actually remember the face. I just think that's interesting now that we see him multiple times see Leland. I think it's just interesting because you don't really get the sense in the show that he really knew what Leland looked like. Well, now we do know he knows what Leland looks like. He could describe him.
Well, if you go to him privately, even with these individuals, do you think, say, for example, even with this mild police force that they bring around, would they be enough to take on Bob in the privacy of his own home? Or would it be best to have a place where people could be potential witnesses as well? For me,
it's open. It's questionable. And also, in Leland's defense, or Mike's defense, I don't know. Leland's hair is white now, so maybe that makes all the difference. Mm-hmm. You don't remember someone if they have white hair now.
It takes him off the grid.
Maybe. We also have, after Leland catches up to Laura and Ronette, he's chasing them kind of through the woods. And there's this scene where we have a flashlight kind of point of view, but it's not really clear who's shining the flashlight because it's like on them, right? So it's not them holding the flashlight. Are we supposed to imply there's someone there, or is it just a filming thing? I think it's just a filming thing, but it's interesting because with how much electricity and lights are at play, do I just not consider the fact that a light is shining on them from nothing?
I think that it's important for just let's say the potential audience that they may have gained. Maybe not a physical one, but a rather spiritual one along the way. So I think that having things watch and look out that are kind of beyond a perspective is just something to add to the general atmosphere of the area, as well as the mystical nature that is definitely being given off. Hey, maybe we do see angels later. Maybe the angels are waving around lights. Woo!
I mean, that's about as useful as the angel seems to be for Laura. We do have Ronette get saved by the angel.
Yep.
A different angel.
Ronette says a small prayer to herself, which is, when you read out the prayer, she basically apologizes to...
She says, "Father, if I die now, will you come and see me?" And then later on, "Don't look at me. I'm so dirty. I'm not ready. I'm sorry. I'm sorry."
Yeah. It's something that I don't expect necessarily from, like being panicked, freaking out, and just like having this very rawness to someone. But that does get her out, which honestly...
Ronette.
Ronette. Which does kind of like make things interesting because it seems that those who seem to commit themselves at least to something either of or adjacent to this faith.
I mean, did it help Annie?
Yeah.
Did it?
She's alive.
Well, depending on what we take is going on.
She's in the hospital. She seems to be the most cognizant person.
Where do you see her in the hospital? Annie.
Okay, we hear she's in the hospital. I'm taking Doc Hayward's word that she is in the hospital.
the man who runs the hospital. So I'm going to take his word for that one. Meanwhile, also, Annie seems to be the most conscious person outside of the overall Black Lodge while she's even speaking out, even despite bleeding out at the time. And then not to mention, I don't think that she's someone who may have been taken over by Bob as well. I think Cooper was a primary target amongst all of that bits of chaos. So if there's anything that's been consistent of people who have been able to leave the Black Lodge or things adjacent to the Black Lodge, faith has been one of the things that have seen them through.
Yeah. It is curious because if the angel is directly, which it's implied, the angel's directly like freeing Ronette, it would imply that like Ronette's guardian angel is a lot more proactive. Like it's like the genie in Aladdin, the cartoon movie, where it's like, hey pal, if you say it as a wish, I gotta do it. But Aladdin, you gotta say it as a wish. I can't do it if you don't say it as a wish. Please say it. It's like when Aladdin's drowning.
I can't do anything unless you're praying. You gotta pray, Aladdin.
It's like you gotta imagine like the guardian angel's like, come on, Ronette. Just say some words, okay? That's good enough. All right, you're free.
Which, by the way, the angel does appear before her eyes. And who is the one who to pull her out of the car? Mike. The one-armed man. Which I find an interesting, at the very least, parallel to Chew on the Mind. I have nothing else that I can
Don't chew on my mind.
I don't have anything to more concretely connect that, but it certainly is a fun, at least if not parallel, a fun team up, if you will. Ronette's angel and Mike.
And then are the angels the same things as a lodge spirit? Because we see Laura's angel in the Red Room.
Yep, inside the
Who, again, notably, Laura did not do any praying, and Laura did not be saved.
Laura did not do any praying. It's just more so, and this is a different one. There's different actress
2 different
credits.
angels.
This angel spirit that she sees from afar, and then who
tells a really funny joke, apparently.
She laughs, and I think that is just a sheer amount of joy from Laura, because at the end of the day, we start this movie, or around the beginning of the movie, where she thinks that she'll begin spinning and burning, and there will be just no angels able to actually be around to reach out to her. But there is one that she can at least see inside of her periphery. Now, I'm thinking that it's joy, okay? Like, it's like a means of joy that she sees that she's wrong, and that's something that she can at least be thankful for. She found the answer at the end of the road that many people may not have.
Yeah.
Now, you could also say, since the angel's not really looking at her and is floating off into the distance, it's a sense of it's out of reach and she can't reach it, and she's laughing at some maniacal response.
It's an extremely open ending.
Yes.
Like, all we could say for sure is, Laura Palmer died. Which is a conclusion you hadn't reached for most of Twin Peaks, the show.
Now.
Yes.
Laura Palmer's in the Black Lodge, okay?
Red Room. We don't know that's the Black Lodge.
We don't know it's the Black Lodge.
I think it's more of a
probably
waiting
Black
room.
Lodge.
It's a waiting room.
Anyway.
Don't get into the Walmart parking lot problem again.
But overall, in the scene prior, as we go deeper and deeper into this fun time Laura Palmer is having, in which her father is calling out. Again, it seems that more so Bob is more present. She begins to wear the ring, and she is being fully captured and wrapped in. As Leland murders, calling out, no, don't make me do this. She dies. But when she dies, we see from like her sitting perspective, as Laura Palmer gets wrapped up in plastic. And begins getting set out onto the river, where some consciousness sort of lies. Maybe the physical body even died, but all I'm saying is that maybe there's just a little Laura Palmer left, and that's
Laura Palmer's physical body died.
Laura Palmer's physical body at the time died. Okay.
Are you memeing or are you serious?
Laura Palmer's part of the lodge, correct? By the end.
She is currently in the Red Room.
Okay. She's currently in the Red Room. Other entities that have been in the Red Room have been leeches, people who are able to be present in someone else's body.
As well as visitors who pass through the gateway at Glastonbury Grove.
Now, she's been more involved in the darkened meanings as well as the overall ring and the powers of the lodge. Who's to say that maybe this might be, like how Bob has Leland, Mike has Philip Gerard.
It does get a little more complicated.
Why cannot Laura have a Maddie Ferguson?
It does get more complicated, though, when you bring in the doppelgangers that are living in the lodge as well, because we see a white/gray-eyed Leland as well as a white/gray-eyed Maddie in there.
Yep.
And they are not either category. They're just dead people, but they have apparently doppelgangers.
Yes.
I don't know if I have anything more with what we've seen that I can comment on with this. It is a mystery with what we have currently.
Laura Palmer did not die. She lives on in other people's bodies. She's the new Leech. She is the new Arm. She is the Moo Bob. New Bob.
So is that your expectation for Twin Peaks: The Return, is that Laura Palmer takes over people?
I don't know who's inside of Sarah Palmer at this point. Let's take this one Palmer at a time.
Okay. All right. All right. So Cooper's also there with the Angel situation too.
Yeah.
And
right
it's
there
interesting
being
because
super supportive.
He's super supportive, and I think, is he smiling in it too, right?
I think it's a smile.
Which also adds curiosity because he's the one who explicitly told her, don't put on the ring. Don't wear the ring, Laura. Then she put on the ring and wore it, and now she's here. Was this the good ending or the bad ending?
I think that this is something in which, like, if she is to come, if fate is inevitable, I think having Dale Cooper there to support her at probably the most intense time of her life, in her death, I think that this is a point in which we would see that supportive Cooper that we've seen throughout the series. I don't think that there would be a shame on you, Cooper shaking his head. I don't think that there would be a point where Cooper is just standing across the room and just staring at her. I think having him right there at her side after what has happened to her makes so much sense for the character.
And we referred to what Laura's doing here as laughing as the Angel's there, but it's a really vague expression that's really layered. And I would simultaneously love to know what direction Lynch had given her, like the actor, what face this is supposed to be, what reaction this is supposed to be. How do you prompt this out of Cheryl Lee? But at the same time, I never want to know, because it looks like it could be laughing, but it also could be painful laughing. It could be joyful laughing. It could be, like you said, someone losing their mind and they're just laughing at the dark absurdity of it, almost like a sense of existential dread seeping into this sort of laughing at everything being like far gone. Or it could be genuine joy. I also want to linger on the idea of the light flickering on her face, that sort of bluish white light that had been appearing throughout the show, the staticky sort of light. Is
it from the angels or the demons?
And did it have sound this time? I don't remember it having as much staticky sounds.
I don't remember having much sound because remember, it's
We've only watched this thing 8 times.
The music is overpowering in the moment.
And this, again, it's in the realm of stretchiness. But when you see flashing light off of someone's face like that, it reminds me of someone watching a TV show, like close up to their face. So, again, the meta angle, is she watching Twin Peaks?
I think that...
Is she literally watching Twin Peaks at the ending? Or even better, is she watching Invitation to Love?
No, I find it... I want to say that it seems to be a complication on what all these spirits are, what they even mean. And the first thing that comes to mind is when the last time lights were flashing in front of her space, specifically when she was the focus, when she was the conscious focus, and that was yelling, "Who are you?"
Well, no, it was actually when she was dying. It was flashing on her face as well.
Well, it was flashing on her face too. I'm going for
one of the last times.
Fully conscious, like no drugs, nothing else going on, but when she is most active and aware. Because we get that there and that when she's dead.
It's, again, really tricky. I think the TV angle makes sense in a sort of cyclical formatting, that it opens up with the TV lights on our face. Like, think about how it would look if someone's in a fairly dark room with the opening section of Fire Walk With Me with that sort of bluish light on your face.
Yeah.
Imagine how that would look on someone, and then just think back again to what Laura's face looks like at the end. It creates a loop.
Yes.
If you believe in that sort of light. Also, that light would have been very likely one of the last things, if not the last thing, that Teresa Banks would have saw.
Yep.
So there is something to that I can't quite escape. And no matter what, it's still tied with that electricity idea that is neither fully good nor fully bad. What does it mean? The best I'm able to come up with right now is, again, danger or fate.
Yeah.
And both are neither good nor bad. Both of them bode ambiguously.
Yeah.
Even it ends with an ambiguous note.
And even with, like, Ronette, like, at the end of the day, yes, she was saved from being killed and captured and having the overall letter put under her nail. at the end of the day, she's still alive, but from what she experienced in her, how that's going to affect her life going forward, that's frightening.
Yeah, it's like one of the most haunting movie endings I think I've ever seen, and I still don't know what it means, like after seeing it multiple times. And I think that that's a real testament to how much that ambiguity is able to be carried through well.
Yeah.
A bit before this, like in between Laura's death and Laura in the afterlife, or not necessarily afterlife, but Red Room, whatever's going on there, we see Leland also in the waiting room area where he is passing through Glastonbury Grove, and he's sort of like floating in front of the Arm and Mike.
It looks like he is hung on a string, if you will, and being like moved around, very much on the end of a puppeteer.
I really like the effect of when he starts leaning forward kind of through that. I think it's a very effective scene.
It very much makes him seem far more lifeless.
When he then casts the blood out after it's been chucked out of my Bob.
Now, mind you, that, yes, it was like Bob who ends up like taking the pain out of this chest. His hand begins shaking terribly. Again, more hand stuff. Hand shaking, if we recall, hand shaking at the final episode, and then that being released.
A good recontextualization of the gesture.
Yep.
I also
holding on to pain and sorrow.
It's a pretty good evidence then that the pain and sorrow that the Arm wanted and that Mike wanted was Leland's.
Yes.
Not Laura's. And that's, I think, kind of important that they weren't really there for her suffering. They were here for Leland's suffering. But Leland's suffering is tied into Laura's suffering in such a way where, I mean,
you're getting a 2-for-1 sale. In the past, you're getting some Garambozia for some cream pork. And whatever this present is for Laura Palmer, you get some more company.
It makes me wonder what Mike was doing, because Mike was there at the train car. He doesn't help Ronette. He pulls her out, but isn't like do anything more to her.
He's a one-armed man. Is he supposed to carry her back?
He's supernatural. I don't know what he's capable of. But more to the idea, like, did he just like catch the scent of Leland's suffering and was just like, there's my Garambozia. I find my Garambozia in this train.
It's the desperation that I think this is just a Mike from another time. Because the next time that we do see him, yes, sure, we're more straight-faced inside the lodge. But it seems that instead of being in that point of desperation, like, I'm pretty sure Bob can very well handle himself with 2 defenseless young women. I'm pretty sure that it's him trying to do his part in this timeline while he himself gets a chance to enjoy his Garambozia with the man he used to be.
Again, just there's so many things that we're left with more questions than answers, because I think the movie complicates things from the show more often than it simplifies.
Yeah.
One of the lingering elements, too, that remains one of the overarching mysteries that is consistent throughout the movie is the ring, which hadn't really been directly in the show prior. There's a bit about Cooper's ring that the giant said would return to Cooper after some things passed. But that's a different ring entirely from what the movie has.
Yeah.
We see that Teresa Banks had the ring, and that, whatever happened with her, she put it on, and her left arm went dead and kind of numb before the murder. And it's not clear if she kept the ring on or not when she died. We know that it was missing from when the autopsy was done.
We know that it was missing during the time that its autopsy is done.
But was she killed with it on or not is the thing we don't know.
It's a hard thing to say.
It was up underneath the Chalfont trailer.
Yeah, whether or not Chalfon's redeemed it, whether or not Bob redeemed it, whether or not it just appears there, that's always just a fun thought experiment. Not to mention, this is, again, the ring hand. We do know that she can smoke with that hand, and that was one of the major pictures that she has. One time she did smoke with her other hand, but that's because her left hand was preoccupied with the Leland, and that, I think, is a much larger vice, in my personal opinion, of this affair. And yeah, and we also know that that same arm goes dead at one point, in which we could say that that's probably when her plans are starting to go away, trying to threaten someone like Leland.
Then you have also Chet Desmond, who appears to have faded away or disappeared almost as soon as he touched the ring. Because there's one of 2 ways you can interpret this. One is that he touched the ring and he literally disappeared as the screen went to black. Because it almost like freeze-framed and then faded in a very specific kind of way. Or B, that fading was narrative shorthand, and something else happened after he grabbed the ring. It wasn't instant.
I'm feeling more of the latter, if anything, just because to try to move the scenes along. Due to the fact his car does appear like right across from where this place would be.
But
And
in
it
an
was
ominous situation of Let's Rock being written on it.
Yes.
Tying
So
it to the one-armed man.
I
Not the
feel-
one-armed man, the arm.
I feel like there was a series of events that happened at first. If, like, I had to assume...
They went on a road trip together.
Either they went on a road trip together. We could still think it's the first one, and it's just someone involved with the town ends up like putting it there as a means of a warning, if anything.
I almost feel like it's a warning, almost like a graffiti left by the arm, like I was here, like almost marking the territory after whatever happened.
Yeah.
It is curious. So like Chet Desmond, we don't have enough to go on to draw a conclusion.
We only know that one of his overall drug devices was caffeine.
Do you believe he's dead?
Do I believe he's dead?
Either in a real sense or a Laura Palmer sense or whatever.
No, he's not floating in a river or anything like that. I do think that if there's anything that was done with him, he might have either A, fallen into a lifestyle that has left him changed, and he is no longer the Chet Desmond people know, or B, he currently is taking some time off at the lodge, or the Red Room, if you will. The lodge makes more of my pun sense.
It'd also be curious to know if the ring can be in multiple places at once. Like, is there only one ring? Can it be in multiple places? Because it's available to give to Laura.
Yeah.
And that's like 2 years later.
Yes.
So if there's only one and it can't be copied and pasted, that would lead to believe that wherever Chet Desmond is, he doesn't have the ring 2 years later.
I think that's interesting that when Ronette was pulled out of the train car, that's when like the ring fell off of her.
Yeah.
And then it was...
But it wasn't the same ring, right?
It was the type of ring at the very least, because then shortly after, Laura Palmer gets the ring on her hand. So to say that something was passed on from one person or one potential candidate and then fully bestowed upon another in a very twisted Bachelor sense.
And again, it goes back to the idea that Cooper told her, do not take the ring.
Yeah.
So
Do not take a ring or do not take the ring. I mean, it might be just a series of rings, like do not take the ring pop.
should Laura have put the ring on at the end? What do you think the ring did when she put it on? Because it has to have done something. There's just too much evidence to suggest that.
The ring itself, it's...
Because my gut would be that it took her to the lodge. My gut would be that it took her soul, it wedded her to the Black Lodge or the Red Room.
With this ring, IV wed. I think that's important. I think the context of the Red Room is important. It is really dependent on when she had it on. I guess what I'm getting at is that, what is this ring? What does it do, and why is it there? This ring, if I had to say, it's something of committing to... obviously, a wedding ring is a form of commitment.
Right.
And to commit to the lodge, to commit to these owls, commit to whatever they're all about, is a commitment you're stuck with.
So Cooper was like, don't do this.
Don't commit yourself to this lifestyle. You need to move away from it. But the thing is that with what Leland had done to her and what moves that he had given to her, especially with the context such as the diary, this lifestyle is as much part of Laura Palmer as Laura Palmer is a part of it.
Well, then there comes the problem of what would have happened if Laura hadn't worn the ring.
If Laura hadn't worn the ring...
Because Cooper believes it would have been a good thing. It's not Doppelkoop who says it.
I think it matters that with, again, Teresa Banks, her ring hand does go numb when she's trying to move away from the lifestyle. They can't take anything away from her if she's not fully committed. Mm-hmm. So I would say that if anything, it would have a chance to save Laura Palmer.
That's my inclination too, is that Cooper is trying to save Laura Palmer's life. But if he does that, what the heck would that do to timelines and situations?
I don't think that thought either A, has crossed Cooper's mind, or if it has crossed Cooper's mind, B, does not matter. Someone needs help. He is the guy that no matter what happens, he will jump in and risk himself for it. And if that means that something's going to happen to him and it's going to mess up like his existence, or he won't exist if we believe in one linear timeline, doesn't matter.
And let's say not wearing the ring would have let her live. I wonder then, would Bob have taken over? Would Bob have taken her over? Because like, if I want to make this very simple in my little monkey brain, right? My little monkey brain would tell me that wearing the ring makes it so that you are kind of claimed. You're claimed by the lodge. I'm taken, sir. Sorry, I'm taken. See this ring on this finger? Beyonce. They put a ring on it. In the sense that she's no longer able to be a host to Bob. And therefore, the only thing Bob can do is kill her.
I think
If she didn't have the ring, she would be possibly alive, but she would be open and available spiritually.
It certainly is questionable because, well, we do see that Leland, we haven't seen a ring on Leland, but the place where I can test that with is with someone that was once committed, holds on to a ring, if not the ring, and that was Philip Gerard.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't for that scene, I don't know if I'm fully convinced on that. I think that whether or not like the ring was had or not, the ring is more so shared custody from the lodge, if anything.
That would make sense, though. Actually, that would back it up, because Philip Gerard can't wear the ring on his wedding finger then, because he is a host.
Okay.
Like, if I'm going by what I just said as a theory,
Yeah.
the reason why he'd wear it on the pinky then is because he literally is already taken by a host.
I suppose with that sort of theory, myself, again, I think it's something outgrown because the whole entire arm backstory, if that is to be believed. So yeah, no, it definitely makes everything tricky.
And we would have a lot more evidence if we knew what Teresa Banks had done. You know what I mean? Because then we could have a sense of comparison. But we don't. We don't see Teresa Banks anywhere, which leads me to believe that she didn't put the ring on, and that's why she died.
Teresa Banks did put the ring on.
Wait.
She has it in the photos. She literally has it.
No, I mean when she died.
Oh.
But then again, no, you're right. Yeah, because if Teresa Banks had worn the ring when she died, and my hypothesis is correct, you would expect to see Teresa Banks in the Red Room in some way.
Yeah, but we still don't.
But we don't. And if she didn't wear the ring, that just means she would have been able to be possessed, but that wouldn't matter in her case.
I think that it's just one of the areas in which if you are fully committed, and that is what happens when, say, for example, you pass or there's just this narrow field between the Black Lodge, that's when you can get, sucked in. Meanwhile, again, Teresa Banks betraying the lodge and trying to move away, why would they welcome her in at that point? So
I feel like this is a mystery we just got to keep chewing on, unless you have any other thoughts on the ring.
Yum, 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 yum. I'm going to... The delicious mystery of creamed corn. Go in my mouth, please.
We haven't mentioned this yet, but creamed corn is a really apt metaphor for pain and sorrow. Creamed corn is disgusting.
Garbanzosia?
Garmonbosia. You ever had creamed corn before?
No.
You ever plan on it? Did the movie make it look good?
Here's the thing. My number one rule for whenever it comes down to food is always try things at least once, but creamed corn is kind of like at the bottom of that list just by the sheer appearance of it.
It's gross.
Like, it does not look appetizing, and I want to get away from that, but I think I need to have a buffer on other foods first. You know, I have to work my way to pain and sorrow.
That's completely fair. Completely fair. So we have reached the end of what I imagine when it's compiled will be another beefy episode.
Yes.
As stated with before, listener, I would be really interested, listeners, I suppose.
Just the single listener.
You personally, listener. I'd be.
You know who you are. We're
know.
pointing at you right now. We're outside your door.
Put a shirt on. Anyway, so listener, listener, please let us know if you like this format, what you would kind of be interested as far as how we proceed with upcoming podcasts, because we're going to be diving into the missing pieces next. Then we're going to do probably our look back episode, we're thinking, and that'll be over season 2, The Diary and Fire Walk With Me and the Missing Pieces. Then we're going to be jumping full blown into Lynch's filmography with some other Twin Peaks oddities sprinkled in, such as side books, special features, etc. Maybe that cookbook at some point, Professor.
Maybe the cookbook.
So if there's something you kind of have in mind or feedback for us, we'd be really curious. For clarity, you can tweet at us at SnakeEyeDreams1 at Twitter, #1. As in, I have like 1 or 2 more things left to say in this episode. First, I kind of wanted to get your overall thoughts on the movie now that we've gone through and kind of heaved out the specifics to the more general assessment.
Okay.
For me, I do include a rating. I use Letterboxd, so I like using out of a 5 point scale. Or out of 10 if you prefer. If you want to give it a rating, you can. If you don't feel like you want to give it a rating, then just give it more of a qualitative assessment is fine.
Okay.
So what did you overall feel about Fire Walk With Me after seeing it so many times?
Very uncomfortable film. It is something in which ends up having a very unique feel for itself. Definitely adds a lot of fun context to already pre-established overall narrative with things such as the Twin Peaks that we've known so far, leads into more mysteries, plenty to chew on, and fantastic performances throughout. No, I overall really enjoy this film. It's something that uniquely impacted me, which is probably going to sit with me for quite some time.
Cool. For me personally, I again say that the performances from Sheryl Lee and Ray Wise are probably the two strongest in all of Lynch's films for me. This is up there as one of my favorite Lynch films. At the moment, I would probably say it's my second or third favorite Lynch film if you were to press me on that.
Okay.
But I think there's a lot of ones at the top for me that are fairly close. It's hard to like separate this from regular Twin Peaks. Hard to divorce it, if you will, thinking of the ring metaphor. I think there are some elements that I would have wanted a little more of or a little less of, but I feel also that it's hard to take much of a stance of cutting things out of this movie without it potentially damaging the whole of it. So I don't think it's a perfect film by my standards. There are some performances that I wasn't as sold on, and I do think that some of those scenes feel like they're being weird just to be weird, and maybe that was a little bit to the detriment of the film. And I still am uncertain how I feel about certain scenes that weren't as integral to Laura's story being included that might detract from the overall focus and scope. But overall, I really enjoy Fire Walk With Me. I would say this is like a 4.5 out of 5 or 9 out of 10 situation for me personally. And I also want to add the clarification here that I think what I really like most about Fire Walk With Me, aside from just the acting performances, is the sense of how complimentary, but also just very different this film is tonally from the original show. Mm-hmm. And I think that it works for me because of how self-contained it is. I emphasize again and again that David Lynch is not the main only person behind Twin Peaks. There are other people that helped it after it got running after the pilot. Especially looking at season 2, there were a lot of creative individuals that we've focused on and highlighted throughout. And I see people kind of credit David Lynch for everything that has Twin Peaks' name attached. I don't think that's doing justice to everyone else involved. And I don't think I would want, again, going by this movie at this time, I wouldn't have wanted all of original Twin Peaks to be like Fire Walk With Me. I like the fact that we have Twin Peaks as a show, lighter, more soap opera tones. There are moments of darkness in it, like with Maddie's death, but overall it has that more fun sense of lightness to it. And then you go to the movie and it's such a tonal shift. I think it works because of the contrast. It works because of almost contextualization too, that Laura Palmer's story is not going to be a fun time. Laura Palmer's story is not going to be a light time. A jokey scene with Andy getting tape all over his body would not fit this movie. But that's where I'm kind of glad then that we got those moments in the show and that so many people were able to kind of contribute to that for Lynch to make almost a weird response to the show. I think it's really interesting contextually. And I'm glad that Laura Palmer's story got to be told in film as well as in book format, and they both complement each other also so well. So I again, really like Fire Walk With Me as a companion piece to the original series. Mm-hmm. It does something different than the show that makes it both stand out, but also makes the show stand out without weakening either one of them.
All right.
Then I have one last wonderful and strange question of the week for you, Professor. So you've now seen Twin Peaks as a show, you've read it as a book, and you've seen it as a movie. Mm-hmm. So my question for you is, if you were to just spitball off the top of your head, how would someone make a good Twin Peaks video game? I want to know what would be fun for that. What would you do for that, or what would you want out of something like that?
They need to create CD-ROMs that were optimized for Windows XP models. And,
ahead of their time.
Well, backwards in our time right now. So if they had to make it now...
Is it, future past situation.
Future past situation. Perhaps just like an old point-and-click adventure, almost on the...
Darkseid.
Not like Darkseid per se.
Aww.
More so like imagine a cross between Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, but also throw in some Oregon Trail elements to all of it.
So I don't know much about Oregon Trail. I assume that's a little bit darker.
You might die from dysentery.
So a pretty light point-and-click adventure then, huh?
A pretty light with dark tones, sort of like probably under the surface, if you will. Mm-hmm. So, but primarily something in which you explore around, you try different interactions with different pieces and objects, throw pieces into a different place, hopefully it works with it, and learn things along the way.
So why point and click? Just because of the time period, or?
No, because overall, finding small little interactions and taking a slower pace with the game is what I think is best, and probably going to benefit the game itself
Okay.
a lot over time.
It's almost like a living access guide to Twin Peaks, like almost like a Welcome to Twin Peaks book, but you're navigating through it.
Yes.
Would you imagine there being a narrative, or is it more free form, just exploring?
Oh, no, there is a narrative. It's just more so that could be all sorts of things. It might be like a piece by piece, chapter by chapter, different mysteries along the way. Maybe you're just trying to solve something generally in the town. Maybe you're part of the Bookhouse Boys and there might actually be something to do with them. So
That would be nice. A nice thought, huh? Maybe Hank Jennings' story could finally be told.
no.
I'm already too poisoned for this question because of Deadly Premonition that I can't get out of my mind the unofficial Twin Peaks video game, basically. If you are a Twin Peaks fan and you're open to the idea of video games and you haven't looked into Deadly Premonition, you might want to look into Deadly Premonition at some point. It is what it is. I can't spoil, because at some point, Professor, I'm going to get you to try that game out.
Oh, no.